Well, let's get going then. Hey. All right. A call to order the special meeting today of August 5th of the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners. Phil, are you going to lead us in invocation?
Please. I'd just like to start by reading from First Timothy. I was doing my devotions this morning. This came up. It's from Paul to the leaders of the church. He says, the first thing I want you to do is this: pray. Pray every way you know how, for everyone you know. Pray especially for rulers and their governments. So we rule well, so we can be quietly about our business of living simple and humble contemplation. This is the way our Savior God wants us to live. Shall we pray? Lord, we thank you that we can come today here as leaders of this county, as government officials. Lord, be with us today as we go through our budget and fiscal responsibilities. Help us as be conservative and pleasing to you. Also, Lord, be with the farmers in this county as they're experiencing drought. Give them the guidance and patience they need to make it through this time of year. Protect us this day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Let's stand for the pledge.
With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Justin.
Sir, Mr. Barry.
Here.
Mr. Jorisma.
Here.
Mr. Zylstra.
Here.
Anima.
Here.
Here. Mrs. Wenzel. Mr. Teeples. Mrs. Rhodey. Mr. Kyers. Mr. Bruger. Mrs. Miedema.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Sounds good. Do we have any correspondence?
None from us.
Okay, this is the opportunity for public comment. Anyone like to come forward? Speak to the board? No one here? Regina, is anyone online? Oh, okay. So let's get to the approval of the agenda. I need a motion, please.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next one is the approval of the minutes of July 22.
So moved.
Comments, questions, anybody? Nothing? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody? Okay. Off we go. Karen, it's on the agenda now for you to talk about. The first thing is the capital improvement plan presentation. All yours.
Good morning. So before we begin the capital improvement plan, we wanted to share a flyover video of something that was prepared by the communications department during our administrator search. It is a kind of an introduction to our facilities and gives us a good overview of some of our operations. So Regina's bringing that up. Okay.
Hey there, and welcome to beautiful Ottawa County, Michigan. With over 300,000 residents and a wide variety of settings, from bustling cities to quiet rural communities to beautiful parks and natural spaces, it's no surprise that it's the fastest growing county in the state. I'm Scott, and I'll be your virtual tour guide today as we take a look at the many county facilities and notable landmarks you'll see as part of the Ottawa County team. And we're starting off with the Fillmore Complex. This campus, which is smack dab in the middle of the county, is home to 4 very important buildings. The first and newest of these buildings is the Family Justice Center. Opened in 2024, here you'll find the Family Division of the 20th Circuit Court, the Friend of the Court, the Legal Self-Help Center, and the Clerk's Circuit Court Records Division. Behind me here is the Administration Building, which is home to the Administrator's Office, Sheriff's Office Headquarters, County Clerk and Register of Deeds, and many other departments. It's where the various boards, committees, and authorities hold their public meetings, and this front entrance is a frequent stop for some of West Michigan's best food trucks. Across from the Administration Building is the Corrections Building, which holds the Juvenile Detention Center and Adult Correctional Facility, and will soon be home to the Veteran Services Department. And last but certainly not least is Central Dispatch, the hub for 911 emergency services across the county. Time to take a right on 120th and head towards the southwest corner of the county to the city of Holland, where the James Street campus is located. Health and Human Services departments like Community Mental Health, the Community Action Agency, also known as OCA, and the Public Health Department are headquartered here. Alongside the Office of the Public Defender, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, a County Clerk Vital Records Office, a branch of the Sheriff's Office, and the Juvenile Court Services Center. If you head south across the Macatawa River, you'll find yourself in a charming, walkable downtown area where the Holland 58th District Courthouse is nestled in with some unique shops and restaurants. And don't forget to spend some time soaking up rays at Holland State Park or our own Tunnel Park. Take a brief detour onto Chicago Drive to find yourself in Hudsonville. Known as Michigan's Salad Bowl, it's one of the largest agricultural communities in the state. Nestled within a sprawling neighborhood on Port Sheldon Street, you'll find the 58th District Courthouse, which also contains a branch of the Sheriff's Office, Public Health, and a County Clerk Vital Records Office. Double back to Holland and head north on US 31, or maybe take the scenic route along Lakeshore Avenue, where you'll pass by some of Ottawa County's most popular and beautiful parks and natural spaces, like Kirk Park and Rosie Bound. In Grand Haven, otherwise known as Coast Guard City, you'll find a lovely downtown area with shops and restaurants and an even lovelier backdrop, the beautiful and ecologically significant intersection of Lake Michigan and the Grand River. Right in the middle of downtown is the Grand Haven Courthouse, which is home to the 20th Circuit Court, Probate Court, and a branch of the 58th District Court. On your way out of Grand Haven, make sure to stop by Ottawa County's newest park, Ottawa Sands. Reclaimed from an old sand mining operation, this award-winning 345-acre natural space features a paved 1.6-mile trail around the lake and a unique camping experience at the Idaho Explorers Camp. I hope you enjoyed this brief tour of Ottawa County's facilities and the communities that we call home. The truth is, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more to discover in Ottawa County. You just have to be here.
Well done.
So next, I'd draw your attention to your packet. So the packet has a copy of the capital improvement plan. So I'll just go over briefly the headings of that plan and what you're seeing there. So this is a fiscal year 26 to 2030 plan. So it's a 5-year capital improvement plan. It includes all of the projects in the county. And so those are included with some description, title, starting on the left. The funding source is the next column over. So, excuse me, OCIA is Insurance Authority, and then there's a fund number. This may not have a lot of meaning to you if you don't know the numbers, but I think we include that in the packet of the county budget, and or if you wanted to know where the project was funded from. The current approved amount. So this is a list of all projects that exist. So there are projects that are currently funded, and so many already have funding. So if the project is already funded, it's still on the list. Projects are adopted for the project life, so they will continue to roll until they're completed. So this is projects, if a project already exists, then you would have a currently approved amount. We pick a point in time and we show you actual spent. So if a project has money that has already been spent on it, that's the next column. And then an encumbrance would be the amount. An encumbrance would be a contract that, or a PO that would still be remaining or outstanding. So it's a commitment to that project, something that we're still holding that we would still owe a vendor. And then an unencumbered balance would be the balance left in the project. So some projects may have no balance, and maybe so that very first project, Building B, I can see there's a small encumbrance balance left of $2,067 that we may owe a vendor, and then there's nothing else left on the project. The balance remaining is zero. So that tells me that maybe we owe the vendor a small payment, or maybe that project is done and we would be having a conversation with the department and asking, is this project complete? Can we close this encumbrance and close this project and capitalize it? So we'll have those conversations as we get ready to close the books and start closing out projects that are complete so that we can capitalize that as an asset. Those projects then, those are what you'll see, projects that are currently funded. And then in the 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30 column, you'll see the plan moving forward. Those are years out that we are planning for funding. So if there's a year that we think we'd like to fund a project as a team, we'll place the dollar amount in that year. So in that same first section, countywide exterior door replacements for 132,000 at the top. That's a project that we're recommending would be funded in 2026 as an example. And then you can see there are other projects in further years out. So that's basically just the layout of the capital improvement plan. And we'll talk about it in the presentation more about, the agenda would be what is a capital improvement plan overall? How do the team that comes up with the capital improvement plan, some of the accomplishments of the team of the plan, and then what would be next in the steps of moving this process forward. Okay, so thank you. So first, the capital improvement plan is really, it's a roadmap. It's a capital roadmap. It lays out our capital spending and needs so we can look at our funding needs for a longer period of time. We're looking to look at our financing needs or our funding needs so we can match the money to the larger expenditures. So, and it's an opportunity for planning purposes. Ottawa County has done planning for a long time. We've done this formalized type of planning since 2015. Team that starts the plan, obviously, probably starts in a lot of departments as they think about their needs and what happens, but the team that actually pulls the plan or starts the initial communications between all of the departments and elected offices is the deputy administrator, facilities director, myself, the fiscal services director, IT director, and strategic impact director. So that team really requests from departments, what are your needs? We send out like a questionnaire asking departments, what are you seeing? What are your needs? And facilities is a great response. So they are both on the team and they also submit a lot of projects. And IT is the same as facilities. So they are on both sides of that as well. So they act in both capacities. So some of the accomplishments that, you're probably very familiar with of different things that we've done in the past or in this past year is the body and in-car camera project. So that project started some years ago and was just completed, and 120 in-car videos and 222 body worn cameras with Axon contract, plus related software for the sheriff and prosecuting attorney's office. There was also a renovation of the Sheriff's Records Bureau that really renovated that area to accommodate growth for staff for the camera project plus other services. It improved building safety at the front desk. And so that was a renovation project that was just completed this past year. The probate court moved from Grand Haven to the probate court from this campus to West Olive when the Family Justice Center opened. The Veteran Services had their groundbreaking ceremony, so that was kind of that kickoff of that capital project that was funded last December. There is also, a number of that, like planned replacements of major equipment and building maintenance, like a DHHS building, Howland Courthouse, Grand Haven Courthouse. So you'll see a lot of HVACs, large projects like that, roofing. There's a large paving project that is currently a contract that was just procured that you'll probably see on a future agenda coming your way soon. There, the server replacement was the $1.8 million server replacement. That was earlier this spring. That was a capital improvement project. That was a major undertaking and accomplishment. That was a CIP project. They're not all planned, right? So we had an emergency electrical work at the jail just recently. Actually, I have it on here because we were going to do it as a CIP, and then it turned out to be a bigger emergency than we originally thought. And so we're actually having that as a claim to the insurance authority. So that's kind of moved into a different direction. But so these things come up, and sometimes they're not planned. And sometimes we come forward and say, hey, we need to address this situation, and we might go this way. On this one, I think we're gonna fund that as a claim to the insurance authority. But some things are planned, some things are not. The idea behind the capital improvement plan is we want to do as much planning as possible to eliminate those unforeseen things. Parks has a separate CIP planning process, and really correlates and runs with their millage timeline. And they have they take their plan to their commission and fold it in with the county plan once it's approved by their commission. So it's a different team, it's a different process, but we do, if you look at the CIP that's presented to you, it does include all the parks projects. And so there was a lot of accomplishments in the parks, and some of them were mentioned on the video with the Ottawa Sands kickoff opening with the 1.7 mile lake loop in Ottawa Sands, plus the camp, the Ottawa Sands camp this year kicked off just before Memorial Day. There was also the purchase of the land adjacent to Rosie Mound. That was a big purchase. And so those are all parks CIP projects that are in the capital improvement plan. That is funded by the Parks millage, and it is tracked and accounted for separately because that funding is restricted because it's Parks millage and restricted for that activity. And plus they have a lot of grants that are also restricted. So we track that separately, but from a county perspective, we're all one county, it's all one CIP plan. And so we show it all together. So next year, looking forward, next year, 2026 projects. So we have a number of projects that are in your plan that the team that we reviewed, that work towards, that are going to receive, that we're recommending to receive additional funding. So projects that may have started or that may have done portions. So interestingly, the jail air handling units, there are a lot of them and they do so many per year, and they don't want to do them all in one time. They want to space them out. So that project is phased over many, many years. So that project is continuing, and we're recommending it for additional funding. So it could till all the air handling units are replaced. Whereas the building automation system replacement countywide, that we would like to do all at once, so that we were setting aside some funding. We did some original research. I think at first they were thinking they could phase it. And then talking to some professionals, we were thinking now that maybe it's better to put it all together. So 2026 would consolidate and be at enough funding that I think we would be at an amount that should be able to completely fund that project for that building automation system. The ADA project funding at Public Health, so that was a grant. I think we started that project some time ago. Public Health received a grant. It's continuing. So this is it's almost like a carry forward of that same grant that the state and will carry it over with Public Health. But from a budget perspective, we're showing it again because it has to be carried over with the department. The elevator replacement program, we have done some elevators and we're moving on to some other buildings and making that recommendation to continue that program. And then GIS has a regular program to do flyovers and keep our pictures and our GIS maps up to date. So that's a regular program that we fund through the CIP. So those are some projects that you'll see in your plan that are recommended for additional but ongoing funding. So it's not the first time you should have seen these projects. New in 2026 is so renovating the treasurer's office. We've done some, facilities has done some work in the treasurer's office, but there's some work to be completed. So it will be finishing that renovation. And then there is a public health clinic administration kind of right in the middle of all that ADA work. And so this project would basically finish that entire building. So that building would be complete, that whole wing of public health would be complete. So this section, so we're recommending to do that as well. There's some gym floors that need to be replaced. And then district court, this is a phase project, district court and the courtroom technology. So periodically, courtroom technology needs to be updated. And so this will be a phase project starting with district court, but they will work together with circuit and eventually replace all the courtroom technology. But they'll pick a vendor, and I would imagine we will do the same. If it was like the last time we did it, it'd be the same vendor throughout all the courtrooms, district, and they circuit picked the same. And they started a phase project going throughout all of the courthouses. Courthouse security stations. So this came up through SEPTID a few years ago, and pending insurance authority approval, they'd like to start that project next year. Moving through the security stations, Family Justice Center was kind of the pilot program to that single point of entry, but then adding a similar entranceway to all of the courthouse to do single point of entry in all of the courthouse. Really new conceptually to the plan this year is a contingency project. So there were a number of projects during 2025 that we came across. I think the IT project was one of them, where there was insufficient funds. And so just having that little bit of wiggle room that was set aside, that we didn't have to go and, dig so deep. And so those would come back to the board, or, be within the same parameters that we did other things. And if it was not used, it'd be just either roll or close or whatever, but just created that as making it a little easier. That the team was making that recommendation as a possible way of making that a little easier. I think It was maybe in response to some of the concerns about tariffs at the time. I don't know if that's the same thread it was or, but there's always these cost increases or things that we just don't plan on. Seems like it's something every year it happens, but so that's a recommendation in the plan that's new that has not been there before. That's a different type of project. And then implementation of a building strategic plan. So this kind of leads into the next slide. So this is a new project. And so what we've done this year is we've kind of consolidated. There was a number of projects that departments submit from a mental health pod to, building additions to space changes to growing out of their space. And what we're finding is there's a real need for a strategic plan built around space, um, department needs, growth, and, um, it's been hard for our team to do that, or it's just something that in our evolution of this plan since 2015, we've just not quite gotten there. So I would say in the beginning, getting people to think beyond 1 year was the struggle. And now, it's like, well, they're thinking beyond 1 year and they're really thinking and they're, and that's good. It's the evolution has been positive, but now we have to put it in context of other strategic plans and funding and where are we going and how does this all look? And so that's kind of been put on the team as a challenge. And how do we do that? How do we go about that? So I think we need to look at, the teams talked about this and we really haven't come up with our solution yet. We've talked about it quite a bit, but we really think the process needs like a top-down assessment of, planning, funding, implementing of new projects, the dollar amount to make the decision, the evaluation of the project, how does it fit in? How does it fit in with everything else that's happening? So the team, the timing, the project selection, frequency of meetings, how do you manage all that? So it's really top down. So it's kind of connected to that project. So while I didn't want to list all of those projects on the plan, because we found out that we used to just list them and put them in an out year. And departments were supposed to know that, hey, it's in an out year. We're not sure about it. But departments used to think it's coming. Well, it's coming in 3 years. And so, it just it wasn't working. And so, and we just push it out and then they'd say, well, it just keeps getting pushed out and that wasn't working either. And so, really trying to put some structure around that where people can understand where these projects are going and what that is. So I think this is an important step in this process to really make this plan meaningful and have departments and elected offices be able to rely on when they're seeing this. So I didn't want to list them and put them in an out year. So I just, if they, and some asked us, asked the team, should we put dollar amounts in? I don't really know what it's going to cost because that's problem number one. They're telling us they're going to build a building and they put down a number. Well, you really wouldn't know what something would cost unless you get some assistance with that. And how are you going to know what it's going to cost 5 years from now unless you get a lot of assistance? So that was the first problem we had. And so, what does that look like? How does that happen? How does that play out? So some we had numbers for, some we didn't. So I just dropped it all in one line. It's not really, the intent wasn't to connect it back to those projects really exactly. I don't know how that will look. It's really intended to, this is what we have, this is where we are, and we really need to work on this step. I mean, it is where we are in the evolution of our CIP growth. So I think that the team, we've had lots of conversations about it. And so I think as a group, and the administration, we've had conversations about it. So all of this has been reviewed and discussed. And so I think this is our big goal. This is our big target. This is where we want to move to. And so as you look at the plan, you'll see that on there. And so that's new this year. Okay, so next steps for this 2026 plan. So there is a review of the CIP. So that's kind of doing the overview today. And then in the budget calendar, it has that this would be on the board agenda, August 26th for consideration. And then fiscal year 26 budget would include the 2026 projects. So the very first year of the CIP would then roll into the 2026 budget. The recommended budget includes the 2026 projects. And then project funding, if all that moves along, would be available October 1st. So then these projects would then be funded as of October 1, when the new year starts. Were there questions?
Just a quick question on the building strategic plan. Can we kind of think of that as kind of a holding pen for ideas, or how would you kind of think of that? I mean, because we have 1.2 million, 15,000, and then 3.6 million in the various out years. So that kind of just seems interesting, the way those numbers fluctuate.
And it really just relates back to how people ask for things. And I didn't want to ignore them. And I didn't want to actually, put their project in. So it was a compromise, I guess.
So it is kind of a holding pen, like folks have said in 2029, we have all these ideas and we're thinking about 3.6 million as kind of a price tag for that.
I can tell you the price tag is probably wrong.
Right, no, I understand. I understand it's a number, right? But I mean, we can kind of think of that as kind of like the first mudroom, so to speak, right?
Right.
But they all kind of come in and just take their shoes off and go from there, right?
Right. So, so it's work to be done, right, as a place to start,
Okay,
as a holding.
okay, and then, so 28, we have 15,000, and the next year 3.6. Why is the variation? Just because nobody in 2028 wants to come into our mudroom then?
It probably wouldn't look like this if we had a strategic plan.
Okay. All right, but it is kind of a anti-chamber rate, it's kind of put your stuff here and then we'll kind of work through it as we go. Okay.
Yes.
Change from year to year.
Right, no, I just want to kind of understand what exactly that implementation is, and it's just kind of, like Karen was saying, it's kind of a holding pen for future ideas, putting some sort of numbers there, and then as we develop, we put them.
I would not
They
see
belong.
this as a long-term project. I don't see this as something staying.
Right.
I just didn't want to, the projects that were being submitted to us as we work through changing our process, I didn't want to ignore what we had received.
Okay, great.
I don't
That really
look at
helps
this
out.
as a long-term, I hope that this project is not here when we have a strategic plan.
And it's just better allocated where it
I
needs
hope
to be
it's
allocated.
more
Okay.
appropriately allocated.
One question stemming off that, Karen, is for this year, for 2026, there's allocated 453,200.
Mhm.
Do you have more details because it's this year?
Well, that one, I had actually unfunded some things. So some things that were funded that there were not really, or the team, not me, that w- w- we had thought like there was areas or things and that really isn't projects that could really move forward. under the, there are things that we need.
Right.
Things that we need to solve, but they're not, as the scope was originally submitted, doesn't really work that way.
Mhm.
So they need to become part of this bigger plan. And so it didn't seem appropriate to leave them funded as
Right.
they were.
I guess I
'cause
just
they-
wonder the
plan-
difference between contingency for this year. And then it's about the same amount. Is it the same
Well-
kind of concept for this year? Maybe I'm not.
Yeah, it isn't really, I just didn't know what, I didn't know what we would need to come up with a plan. So I left it on that line as opposed to contingency. Because I don't know, maybe there's something that we need. I didn't want to be presumptuous and say that there was nothing needed in relation to that project that existed. Because there could be something really important about that that needed to be done. And I didn't want to not have any money to address
Sure.
if the strategic plan had a short-term solution that needed to start when we created some idea. So it really was, so it didn't, to me, it didn't necessarily fall into a contingency funding idea. It fell more into, this is something that we need more planning around, more, we need a bigger understanding of how all this fits together.
I had a quick question. Do you have any commentary on the exterior door project? It's actually one that I was wondering about.
The exterior door project.
I was just curious.
That is the one right at the top,
Yeah. Yeah.
132,000.
Yep.
So I do not, but I think Gabby was going to join us, so she probably does.
Cool.
Hi.
Thanks, Abby.
Did you, what information would you like
I
about?
was just wondering what the plan was. I know there's been a lot of different door upgrades and there's been alarm, the key swipes and everything. So I was just curious.
So this is our exterior facing doors that are entering into the building. So the fitting for the doors are the age of the buildings. Many of our buildings are hitting 20 years. So you're starting to be able to see some of the outside from the inside. So it's going back in and replacing the doors in the metal around them.
Okay. Thanks.
I have a couple of questions. So I really like what you're saying about coming up with the strategic plans. I'm a little unclear exactly what that line item is, but I very much support you guys doing an analysis and coming up with a plan for the buildings, because I think that's something that's been repeatedly asked for over the last couple of years. And for some reason, it just hasn't really happened. And so I like the thought process of that happening under your committee, because it just hasn't really come together. So, so I hope truly a formal strategic plan does happen surrounding all of these needs. So very thankful to hear that. It's a little unclear if that's actually what this line item is, or if this just kind of is where things landed that maybe aren't formalized. So I don't know if over time you can provide us more information on what's going on under that number. I would really like that. Under what's listed under the strategic plan. I do have a couple of questions. So you just said that part of that figure was made up of some things that were unfunded. So I would be curious to know, what were those things that were unfunded that made up that number, just so we know what is changing.
So you could look at the minuses. So there's a minus of the storage barn fire suppression of 375,
Okay.
you above. So they have to, they show,
Yep.
and then the mental health pod of 78,200. So that was,
Okay.
it's It's the, we funded an architect, $100,000 for the architect to come and to do some work with the sheriff's office. And so I think it moves some of that money up there. So there's it's the minuses that become part of that.
Okay. With a mental health pod, that was actually one of the questions that I had. Is that still happening? Because our understanding was that that was really a high need. So are we still doing something to meet that need?
It is one of the projects that shows up in that strategic planning.
Okay. So it's not being forgotten about, it's just still being figured out. Okay. And then also in looking at the veteran services relocation, those numbers don't all completely add up to me. So the current approved was 227,000. We still have it's not showing any spend. And then it shows some encumbrances and unencumbered numbers. So are we still working with that full 227,000 or has some of that been moved?
No, the 227 would be the correct amount. That was
Okay.
what the board approved. This is, it's dated in June. So were the funds encumbered when we pulled this? Or were the bills paid?
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a while for vendors to give us an invoice. I
Okay.
know there was work done for that July groundbreaking.
Yep.
So, but we may not have had those invoices at that time.
Okay. But
We
no,
haven't encumbered those
Okay.
amounts at that time. Like,
Okay.
I'm not sure who we were working with exactly.
okay, but that full funding is still there for
Oh,
the
yes.
project.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, so I guess that's just my one concern with the line item, the implementation of the building strategic plan is, I understand it. Again, I really love the idea of you guys doing a strategic plan. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we need 2 line items there or something, but I like seeing the information of what's happening with it. And so, personally, I want to make sure that we continue to see that the mental health pod gets done. And it sounds like it will. But I like to see that information on paper because otherwise we don't know what happened. So,
And so I think, I just think as the board goes into your strategic planning and that allows the committee and the administration to do strategic planning, that's great, right? So that sends huge direction to committees and departments and huge direction.
yeah, so we'll continue to see it in other ways. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
I had
Do you mind?
another-
Go ahead.
One other quick question for Abby, maybe just wondering about the building automation and how that is going. It's kind of a large one. Is it
Hello. So the building automation system, we have prepared the scope of work for the RFP. So it's I believe it's like 4.3 million total. And so it's countywide. So right now we have 2 to 4 building automation systems in most buildings, and they conflict with each other. They don't speak the same language in computer jargon. And so it causes a lot of problems when we're trying to seamlessly heat and cool the buildings. So we are prepared. We would like the new director of facilities to take a look at the proposal before it goes out for RFP. So any changes that he will be making to it, I would assume would be done in a relatively short period of time, and then this would go out for solicitation.
great?
Would love to add on to your mental health pod, but then also segue it into possibly a couple questions for Sheriff DeBoer. I think he's here. I would love to hear from Sheriff DeBoer on the mental health pod, if you feel like how we currently are budgeting for it is satisfactory from your opinion. And then also if you would like to share with the board at all your 3-step process, or I think over the next few years of, I think it's in our budget here. I forget what it's called. But if you want to head and have an opportunity to just briefly touch on it.
Can you back it up a little bit and explain to everybody what the mental health pod
Sure.
is? Yeah.
And so ultimately, you're looking at increased instances of us dealing with mental health in the jail. I mean, it's no secret out there that a majority of people that we house in our correctional facility suffer from some sort of mental health or medical issues. And right now we have a wonderful contract with a medical provider, but just the movement of prisoners around the facility to go to the medical facility or to be able to give an increased service level to those with mental health issues becomes a security issue. And so my predecessor, Sheriff Kemker, had put in the CIP the idea of a mental health pod. I believe it was funded through the CIP, and a certain amount of money was given to an engineering firm that came out and came back with a larger amount than I believe Sheriff Kemker was prepared for. And so I think it kind of was backburnered just because of other priorities with the Family Justice Center. So when the CIPs came up this year, I reinstituted and resubmitted for a CIP. So I think that money going back is more just there's that amount of money wouldn't even get us to clear the ground out there, much less to get it funded. So it is our intention on going forward. We have some rudimentary plans for where it could go, but then the conversation became, is a partnership with community mental health and some of their grant funding a more appropriate way to go? Is that something we can look into? So we're kind of in that stage of, it's an idea and it's out there and it's important to us because obviously after COVID, we stopped housing some of these low-level nonviolent prisoners. We used to have, people in there for 30 days, 90 days on, smaller driving crimes and whatnot. Well, all those rules changed during that time, and we haven't gone back to them. But we're still seeing more and more people that are being housed there, and those people have significantly more issues with mental health. And so having it be more secure in our facility without moving people through non-secured areas, or I wouldn't say non-secured areas, but down the hallways, creates less risk for our personnel, but also less risk for the inmates that are suffering, also providing them the services they need, because ultimately our end goal is that anyone leaves our facility better and in a better place than when they got there. And so if we can do that through that, then that's our goal. So I hope to work with you all and possibly community mental health and possibly and the administrator and fiscal to try and work that through in the CIP.
So back to the question, do you still feel like currently how we're projecting for the budget then as far as the mental health? Because you've did a really good job of explaining where we're at, adequately prepares for this coming fiscal year.
My understanding of this, well, I don't know what our funding proposal for this current year for that building process is. I would imagine that's a larger project. So ultimately, I would imagine that has to fall into this plan of ours, this strategic plan of, and I think that Karen's proposal for having that process where she might see, because of CIP that comes from CMH that I don't see, and my proposal that comes in, she might see a nexus there and say, we can do so much more by putting these two things together. So I think it would be wise to put that through that sort of process to make sure that we do one thing and we do it well and we do it at the right time. And so ultimately, I don't have any complaints. I just want to make sure that does fall on our priority list as far as getting that done. I think I put in 2 or 3 projects. Some of them I understand, especially given the price tag and just completing that large building across the parking lot. It might be a couple years yet, but ultimately I'm happy with where we're going and the reception I'm getting when I bring these things up to both you guys and the administrative personnel.
Which is great. I just don't want to see this continue to be pushed out.
I would agree.
When there's safety risks and we're working with vulnerable populations, to me, that rises to the level of urgency. So I hope that we prioritize it as soon as possible.
And ultimately, I'm you know, you guys set our budgets and set that. And if you say that I have the money for it right now, I'll go home and change and we'll start digging in the back lot right now. But ultimately the strategic plan of how we use our money as a county is going to be on you guys, and I'll just submit with the things I need, and hopefully we'll all work out. I don't want to keep shouldering everybody else out of the way to get the things that I need.
Thank you.
Right. And then Commissioner, as far as my implementation plan for the reorganization and the money that would be a separate, this wouldn't be in part of the CIP. I'll be willing to sit around, and when you guys get to that in the budget process, I'll come back up and explain it, but I don't want to jump my spot in the line.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
If Eric, if you could
Yeah.
just hang on for 1 second, just
Yeah.
kind of update on the body cam and digital media and just kind of see.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. The deputies, we just rolled it out to court services and transport. We kind of found an interesting end around. We were putting them in our transport vans, but they don't have the mobile data terminals that all our patrol officers had. So we found a way around that. It's been working wonderfully. It saved us the ability to look into some allegations that were wrong, but it's also allowed us to kind of hold ourselves to a higher standard. And then with some of the stuff that we'll be doing that we'll talk about later, it'll also give us the ability to recognize where we need to just keep doing slightly better and use it like a football player uses their tablet on the sidelines after a bad outing. They can constantly be improving. So we're at the cameras are implemented. We just got done implementing the paperwork system where we can put in our paperwork for, use of force, damage to property, all those kind of things, so they can be reviewed properly. The next step is just the periodical reviews, and then there's a personnel section that we'll use as our personnel record. So those are ongoing. So the part that you guys have paid for, the technology, the hardware, that's all implemented now. The back end is a constant project to get that up, and it's been going great.
Okay,
And I thank you very
thanks,
much
Eric.
for all your support on all that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, Eric gave a presentation to the department heads last month or so on this, and it was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
It was eye-awakening to me.
Yeah, ultimately and because it's so new, the events that have been getting captured are still in the court process. It's my intention once we get to a point where we've had them long enough that they've been through the court process that we'll start making some of those things public so that the general public knows what our deputies are doing while they're fast asleep, keeping them safe. But right now I can't release those publicly yet because they're in the court process. So
Thanks, Eric.
thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Just a quick response to the mental health pod. I had a couple opportunities to talk to Sheriff Kemker while he was going through that process. And, the architect firm that he utilized was one that I did some work with since I retired. They put an extremely robust plan together. I think that was, the first steps of a good process. And then when it was discussed at the administration level, it kind of died because of the result of funding. It originally was being looked at as with some of the ARPA funds and the board initiative funds, and it just didn't end up coming to fruition. So part of the foundation that Sheriff is now talking about is already there. And it's a good plan. I mean, you'd ultimately have probably somebody else to come in and do kind of the same plan. So it's really in the position now of determining that as a priority for people coming into the system, and also a way for this county board to fund it as a significant project into the future because of the cost associated with it. You just don't convert a current section of the jail into a facility of that nature without it being extremely costly. So again, there's parts of that are already in place that I would hate to think that you'd reconstruct that part of the process. So so it's more of a funding piece.
Yeah, I mean, I have the plans in my office. It's just converting them into 2026 dollar amounts and working with engineers past that and architects past that to get the systems in place. So yeah, we have a great start to it. It's just whenever that's prioritized by this board.
What is do we have a ballpark figure just so we know going
Did I
forward?
submit, Karen, was that, it was somewhere between $3 and $5 million, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think it was on the upper side of that.
Yeah, 5 million. Yeah, I
Okay.
think originally it came in at 5 million, and that might have been, I think we put in what they requested back when Sheriff Kempker put that in, so it would be significantly more than that with current construction costs.
Okay.
I would like to add, I'm not sure who here has been over and toured the jail, but when you do, you can learn more about exactly what is going on over there and what pod might be transitioned or converted and how it might happen. That brings a lot more understanding to both the project itself and the mechanics of it, but also the need. So personally, I would like to see this as a higher, in general, a higher priority if we could, get it moving. Because you see the population over there, and it is pretty sad what's going on. Some of the individuals who are housed, who ideally would be in a mental health pod, but are actually just in like general.
Yeah, generally they'll have to be in a higher security pod, and that's not necessarily the best either, right?
Right.
Because there are people that are there because they're evil, and there are people that are there because they're sick, and generally they're the same safety risk to us. And I don't know that they necessarily, I mean, they're kept separate as best we can, and there's, they're only allowed out, separately and that sort of thing. But ultimately, I think those are two very different things, and we should consider that.
Yeah, I agree.
Let me follow up on that because that's a perfect segue of what I was. Gary and Karen, what's the logistics from the CIP strategic plan and the strategic plan we're going to do as a county? How do those two plans mesh? And you can use this example of the mental health pod as an example. How do we bring those together? Or do we? Is it something we'll talk about? I mean,
I think it's something you talk about. I think for the board, this will be a separate kind of process. I think the team that, Karen is suggesting here, I guess what I envision is the sheriff coming with the mental health pod as an emphasis and how important it is. And, if the board in their strategic process looks at some overriding projects that they would like to put on their platter as being able to say their accomplishments. And I think you recommend back that, certain ones of these may have a high priority. And
so this plan, the CIP strategic plan, whatever it is, would be taken to the board's strategic plan and discussed among the various objectives. Is that how you're seeing it?
I could see that occurring, because you are the ones that ultimately fund these types of
Right.
projects, and especially when they're kind of over the threshold of a dollar figure that is somewhat different in these types of situations. So, yeah, I think they can be worked into both, but I don't necessarily believe that they're part of the overall board strategic planning process. So,
Right. Yeah, there's a need, just a specific needs for these items long term. It's just identified that these are going to have to happen at some level. I have a clarifying question, I think, for Karen. Are some of the funding sources for these projects kind of, in a way, department funded through like cost reallocation and recapture and different things?
Not the mental health pod.
No, but
Right,
if we look at like a CIP in general, there's kind of some funding streams that if you just took funding from one area and moved it to another, some people might not be real happy. Right? Isn't there some kind of analysis that would have to be done?
There is some, but I would say it's not as much as you might think.
Okay, well, that's good, because then we get through strategic plan work and identify priorities, and maybe it does impact this, maybe a little bit.
But I mean, so it's, just to kind of piggyback a little bit on that, we're talking like the building automation system, which is now something in 26 that has funding. And I don't want to compare that to the mental health pod exactly, but there's the marrying of some of those things together and then the planning out of how all that comes together and how we make all of that work together, because they're all needed at at some level.
Yeah.
And how all of that works in one plan. And how
Not to
it
speak
works
at it.
with the number of other things that, depending on what comes out of these discussions,
And
how you may feel about those items.
And I think as, one of the rationales of showing that video up front is we have some pretty nice facilities in Ottawa County, but minus the Family Justice Center, they're all starting to age. And along with that aging process involves, looking at the infrastructure of the building. We have the situation over in the jail right now. The standards for building out that jail way back when were different than they are today, as far as the conduit being underneath the pad and things like that nature. So again, there's a lot of projects, that have been identified that involve the infrastructure of the building. The controls, the air handlers, which, go on top of buildings, you don't see those compared to, some of the outside structures and stuff. So again, I think this board is at that stage where they have to invest some priority decision-making on how we move forward from here. And, and again, not to downplay the Shores project, but, there are many of these projects that are priorities at different levels. And, again, I would just hate to see you start this whole mental health pod all over from the beginning.
Totally, yeah.
Because you've already invested a lot of time and resource into it. I think everybody feels there's, significant importance in looking where it goes from here, because nothing's really happened with it. When they originally proposed it, 3 to 5 years ago.
I think, I was, somewhere around there. It might have even been earlier than that. I'd have to look at plans
The
again.
problem hasn't went away.
Right.
They're making some accommodations for people with mental health issues in the jail, but not like having a separate structure within the walls, so.
May I jump in?
Right.
My question is not about the mental health pod, but I'll just briefly address that. I agree. When I took my tour of the jail, the need is obvious. You walk into holding and you have somebody suffering from mental health with the general population, and they're screaming for hours and hours on end as a deputy is trying to type up a report of what's going on. It's a very difficult and unusual environment to try to work in and actually subject other inmates to with that. So we definitely, from my point of view, need to address this from a safety standpoint and just from a decency standpoint to people. My question is not for you, Sheriff. It's more for administration. And I just want to step back, and back up to maybe like a 10,000-foot view as we're talking a lot about this strategic plan that we're going to, work on here together. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about that. And, I feel as commissioners, we're elected to represent our constituents to do two primary things, to provide oversight to administration and to also be good stewards in how we oversight the people's money. And I look at our population, and we're currently at, a little over 300,000 people in Ottawa County. We can definitely look at a lot of tells on how we're doing when we see families and building or businesses seeking out Ottawa County as a place that they want to move to. We're growing, right? We can see that. We can see amazing facilities. The county is made up of two basic things. It's people and services, and we use these facilities to carry that all out. With a budget of a little over 300 million and a population of 300,000, you know, when you do some basic math there, it looks like we're collecting and spending about $1,000 per man, woman, and child in our county to provide these services. So my question is more along a stewardship line of thought. Are there tools out there? And I know that we have things like our bond rating, AAA bond rating. That's a good tell that we're doing good financially. But are there tells out there that we can seek as commissioners to assure our constituents that we're spending the money wisely, that we're providing the services at the same level or better as other counties that have similar populations? And I understand that our county is unique and that we're blessed with some amazing parks that other counties don't have access to. Other counties may suffer from higher mental health and, you know, drug abuse issues, so they have more crime to deal with. So their spending might be different. But is there something, you know, like a consumer rating where people can see similar counties like ours, other populations that we as commissioners can look at and say, okay, Indianapolis, I'm just using, is collecting this much money per citizen, and they're able to provide this suite of benefits and services to these people. Is there some sort of outside measuring stick that would help us know if we're doing a good job? And you know, obviously people vote with their feet and they come here and we're growing, and I feel like we can make that case, but I'm just seeking for continuous improvement for ourselves, that we can validate how we're spending in the right. We always want to be spending the people's money in the highest and best use. And today we're identifying a lot of these highest needs that the money needs to go to. But yeah, how do we show that how do we know we're being good stewards?
You know, you're going to think this is kind of a cliche type answer, but I think we depend a lot on our elected officials. You know, they're all over the state. And, you know, you go to Lansing, you go to, you know, meetings with your counterparts and you hear what they're doing. And I think coming back and sharing some of the processes that we've been through now with the budget process this year, you know, I think we heard of programs that work, programs that we're willing to try, but also we want some accountability as we go into next year, and we'll be talking about that when we get into the actual budget. I don't know of a mechanism that'll readily give us that information. I think we're really dependent on our countywide electeds, our department heads that we send away to trainings and they get a chance to interact with other counties. And historically, we've always come home and said, you know what? We're pretty fortunate. We're pretty fortunate that this county board supports us in our service levels. You know, and we're going to do that with mandated and discretionary funding this coming year. So I think, you know, your staff here does an excellent job on identifying, you know, if somebody's doing it better than we are, you know, let's look at that and figure out how we can do it better than them, or at least as equal to. I think that's went on historically around here for years. You know, we used to reap the benefits of other people that have tried stuff. And we'd come home with it and say, you know what, we're going to fluff it up a little bit. We're going to change it and we're going to make it ours. And, you know, it's stuff like that that works. And, but I wouldn't know a website or anything to go to that would say, you know, you ought to look at what Oakland County's doing. Look what Shiawassee's doing. Because I happen to think we do what's best for our county. So
Well, just to quick jump in, just in my cursory Google search, it looks like Kent County's total budget is about 625 million. They've got 673,000, so they're maybe a little bit ahead of where we are. Muskegon, on the other hand, is total budget of 335 million and a population of 177,000. So they're more at.
And you really need to be aware of the services provided.
Yeah.
I think, that measuring stick is Muskegon has CMH as a department. And you'll see this in the next presentation. The CMH as a department, their Health and Human Services is a huge portion of our budget. Whereas in Kent County, CMH is an authority. Maybe they have other things that we don't have. I don't know. You'd have to dig in and find out. So it's really individual to each community. And that's what makes it so hard. They keep trying to do things to make us comparable so that you can look across because they keep putting things on us that give us chart of accounts and make us report things but it's really unique. Each community is very unique. So if you have a measuring stick, is it tax rate? Our total tax rate is the fourth lowest. Our county operating is seventh lowest. That's,
Yeah, I think
those
those are great tells that
are-
the people are getting a great bang for their buck. I mean, that's essentially what we're trying to communicate
Right.
and validate. And if we're not doing it, we want to focus on how we can make sure that happens.
Because those things, because things like CMH are funded by Medicaid, because those other types of services generally have other revenue sources.
Mhm.
And I think that's why people tend to go towards that property tax because counties and local units are so dependent on it.
If I could just jump in, this may be a project that'll be a work in progress a little bit, but maybe we could take a look at trying to create a dashboard for county and then try to figure out those metrics, some like the taxable rate or people that are served by different departments or, how's our budget line up with other counties, but certain initiatives are worth it to some people's, other initiatives aren't worth it to others. So that can be kind of subjective, I guess, but maybe a dashboard is something we could look into to make it kind of easy for people to understand what are they getting for their money.
Along those lines, Karen, have you guys started putting the open gov kind of charts on the county website? I think I've seen some of those. Where there's like graphs and pie charts and I think that's kind of helpful with some of this data.
So our budget book is interactive and the 25 budget book is in OpenGov and that is on the website.
Yep. So that's really helpful in seeing some of this visually already. I do have just a couple other things too. Going back to the building authority thing again, or not the building authority thing, but the mental health pod. So thinking about strategic planning and stuff like that, this process right here, right now with the CIP is actually where we make the decisions about how we're going to allocate money. So for us, this is kind of our strategic planning on this subject is right now this process for CIP. So an example of that was a year or two ago, we became aware of major ADA noncompliance across the county. So because of that, we prioritized that in the CIP planning and we adjusted numbers, we adjusted priorities, and we made that happen during this budget process, specifically in regards to the CIP plan. So and in that instance, I think we had some ARPA dollars and we had perhaps some easier ways of adjusting funding. But all to say, it can happen right now during this process to actually make adjustments. Now, if they're major, obviously it can be a little harder to do that, but it can be part of this process. It can be part of this process next year. It could happen in the in-between. But it is, it is our job to make those decisions about priorities, so.
I have a question about under the technology tab on page 9 in the packet. It brings up, again, the Board of Commissioners electronic roll call, stating that there was 100,000 budgeted for it. That 59,000 and some change has been spent. And then some of the extra. So I guess I'm just wondering, where was that money put? Like, I guess what came as a result of it? And I guess an update on maybe where we're at on that project. I don't know if you want to talk about that or if Justin wants
Happy
to,
to.
or I see him nodding.
Speak a little bit into it. This is kind of a obviously ongoing project that started originally with COVID dollars that were kind of rolled into this advancement in technology. Granicus was the vendor that we went with for it. We've been in a long ongoing process of working through their implementation where we've really been quite disappointed, not just on our end, obviously, where we were taking the lead on it as the interface who's physically here in the board meeting, but it encompassed a lot more than just board meetings because it was kind of a workflow process through everything that would go through the board agendas. So document submission from various departments and fiscal services, IT, and others were involved in that as well. And we were disappointed, to say the least, I think in this service, the quality of service that we were getting through this training and onboarding process, things that were promised on the sales end initially. A couple of decisions that former Administrator Gibbs had made to include additional items into the overall package that added a little bit of cost, but also weren't going to work according to how they had sort of proposed it initially on the sales end. And we ended up in consultation with, the other departments, administration and corporate counsel, requesting essentially a refund of the contract, as well as the funds, the 59,000 that was previously spent. We do use Granicus. The county uses Granicus for our gov delivery service. And so I think in the letter from corporate counsel to Granicus, there was sort of a possibility suggested of rolling some of those funds into the existing gov delivery contract that we have. But overall, we just looked at it. At the end of the day, in my view, the public was not going to get a benefit from this. And I don't believe there would be any significant savings of staff time or of the work involved in the process of what it looked like compared to what we do right now, compared to the workflows that we have right now. And so my view was that we needed to back out of this and save money.
Can I be more honest than Justin?
I'm glad we're having this discussion because I've been
Yeah.
wondering about this one for a while and
It was a failure. And we're in the process of recouping some of our dollars. And again, if you want to stop by sometime, I'll be even more.
we be able to see a reallocation of this line item then? Or are we just keeping it in there for a certain reason?
It would revert back to the board initiative funds is how I would imagine that
Aware
would
of that.
work.
Okay.
Because that was a board initiative grant
Right.
initially. So I would assume that would revert back.
Is there any action that this board needs to take to make that happen as we go through this CIP?
I would assume once we get resolution that gets closed, that we would just do that with a amendment like other closed projects, other projects that have not fully utilized, or it was over, right? It's over, it's done. It
Mhm.
closes, it goes back. We've had other instances of that, not necessarily failures, but they just didn't use all the funding, wasn't required.
Is it our hope to receive back the total amount that was currently approved? How are we looking on that as we work
Or
through the
self-
legal?
Equal to.
Okay.
What line item are we talking about here, guys?
Yeah.
Which one is it, Elson?
We're referring to Board of Commissioners electronic roll call.
Under technology.
Yeah, okay.
And just one more thing on the strategic plan. You know, I do view this a little bit different in respect that the team that's going to be developed around that is really the one that has to understand the whole project of strategic planning for that group. You know, I guess I won't be here to see that through, but you know, my vision is that by the time it comes to the board, I mean, the board shouldn't have to deal with, well, what's the strategic plan for this? They should end up with a project that you believe that they've vetted as best that they could. And now it's sitting in front of you to make that policy decision.
Yep, and I agree. I think the only thing is, I think it might be helpful to maybe early in the process say, hey, what are some priorities of the board? So that something like a mental health pod, you know, isn't missed. And then we have to do massive reconfiguring at the end. And sometimes things come up and you don't know about them until later in the process. So I think there just still has to be some flexibility. But like, for instance, with the ADA thing, you know, that wasn't something we were aware of. So I think it's important for the board to still have, you know, the voice and the statutory authority that they have over the legal spend on the county. But totally agree about, like, we can't put, it's not our job to put that together. So hopefully, you know, there can be enough communication that we're all working in the same
Well, and
direction.
it's one thing for the sheriff coming to this board and saying, this is what we need, this is what we'd like. But it's another thing going to that committee
Right.
and laying out all the rationale, and that committee then doing their due diligence and vetting it and then moving it to the board for placement in
Right.
the process.
So, any more, Karen, on this issue? Are you ready to move on to the next one?
Ready?
Will this be available at the finance committee as well? Are we gonna have like another opportunity to maybe have this on the agenda? I think we have in the past.
What, help me guys, this is the
I-
first time I've been through.
To me, this is a first look at the CIP plan. The only thing I see on the current schedule is a vote at the end of the month to approve the CIP plan. I think from my perspective, it would be very beneficial to this board if there's any additional follow-up questions that we would want to ask, that we would put it on
Yeah, no,
the,
I would support that as a chair to make sure it gets on the agenda.
So this is the 5th next, we have a finance next Tuesday, right? 7 days from now. That's what you're thinking about?
yeah, and if you
Yep.
wouldn't mind putting that on, that would be amazing, because I think that gives us additional time. It gives the public additional time. They may listen to this, have some additional comments or questions.
Yeah.
We may have additional comments and questions.
Now's the time to have those conversations.
I guess I'd defer a little bit to Rachel, because if we wanna get this process completed, then we could get it on finance. And if we're at the point where all questions are answered, and if Karen's got to change something, we could then get it to board action at the end of the month. But we still need a public hearing, correct?
Okay, so CIP generally goes to planning, not finance.
Okay. Hmm.
It's a little unusual. The money comes from finance. The document generally is approved by planning. A little different than the.
I don't think it makes any difference because we're
It
all,
doesn't really make any difference.
Just so we
It's a,
see it.
I think what Gary's referring to is, and it's later on your agenda, is that the public hearing is currently scheduled for the day after Labor Day,
Yep.
9 a.m.,
second.
September 2nd. So if, depending on, if you noticed that when you adopted the budget calendar, and it would be fine to leave it just as it is,
Yeah.
but it would also be acceptable. You're not, just because it was in the calendar, you're not locked into that date either. You could pick a different date. If
Could you pick
were-
the date of the board meeting on the 26th?
You could pick the date on the 26th, but that we have notices that have to be advertised.
Yeah.
And the advertisement has to be at least 6 days prior. And then there has to be, so we walked through this with Rachel yesterday or a couple days ago. And her filing date to get it to the paper, I think, was the earliest was August 13th, which is pretty quick to get those notices. And so if you're going to make a lot of changes, right, depending on what you discover, we need to get it into the format that gets advertised because all the numbers get advertised. We advertise numbers and we put a packet on the website and we put a packet in the clerk's office so that the public can come look at the details. And so all of that has to be ready to go. So, there's just a timing thing.
So let me make sure I get this right. Rachel, help us with it. So you're saying that in order to publish notice on time for a special hearing on September 2nd, we need to post that by August 13th. Is that what Karen's saying? No?
Not September 2nd. September 2nd, we have it all on the
Yeah,
budget calendar.
okay.
You're,
So
by
if we
the,
move it up to the 26th,
right, September 2nd, because what it actually, the calendar says that if, based around the September 2nd date, we had said board work sessions would be the 5th through August 19th. So that gave you the next
Couple weeks.
encompassed your few meetings, your finance and planning meetings to have some Tuesday work sessions if you.
And why I suggested next Tuesday, because that falls within that time frame.
And it meets that deadline. And then we had already worked it out with Rachel. We met those timelines and we were set. That's the September 2nd. It's the moving up to August
26th.
26th that we have new timelines to meet. So if you want to move it up, the new timelines would be different.
And maybe that's not really necessary if we're tracking on schedule is
Mhm.
to
So
move
that-
it up. Yeah.
Just leave it as is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll bring it to planning next week. We'll have a board meeting on the 26th, and we'll have the special meeting on the September 2nd.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Public hearing, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gina, we got that idea? It's going to be on the planning agenda, Bill? That'll be,
Can
okay, okay,
can-
guys.
I just ask one question?
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't take it away from you.
I'm glad we're having the conversation. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, would it be possible just to get some more information on the mental health pod? I'm not saying that I feel it has to, get on this year's budget or whatever, but I would just love to see what is a time frame that, we're looking at to make this reasonably happen. What could that look like? Just so that we're sure we're not gonna miss it, Like, do we have some sort of a plan? Or can we come up with some sort of a plan? It can be tentative, obviously, but what would some thoughts be about when could this happen? Potentially, what would the cost be and what would we need to do to make that happen? I would just like that feedback as we go into the budget, so.
Is that something Eric and Karen, you have enough time to really do in the next week? I mean, that's essentially what she's asking, at least to give a preliminary idea, or is it not realistic?
There's the old one that's.
Well, again, we have the plans. I just think that you would have to, in order for it to inform a conversation about budget, it would have to go out and be bid or go through someone that could give us some sort of estimate. And I don't know that, especially given that the CIP for 2026 is in place, I think it might be worth saying, let's take a look at it so that we can plan for it to possibly be in 2027. I just know how we were working pretty hard to make sure everything fit into this year's budget. And I just don't know that I want to throw a grenade in it right now.
And that would be great. It's just if we don't start
No.
now, then
100%.
it doesn't happen next
And
year.
again, I think that's where that CIP plan that Karen's proposing will say, okay, what are your priorities for this next year and the year afters? I think that a strategic plan looks at where you want to go, and the CIP is more like an action plan that says, okay, how are we going to get there? So I think the two are actually kind of done together. I think we worked with DSI this past year to put together an action plan. It was based on what our strategic goals are, but these are these specific active items that we are going to do. And I think that's kind of more what you're looking at here. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I can get it together for next week. I don't know if it's I don't know if someone's willing to do a bid for
And
no money. So
And understand, I'm not even asking
There's-
necessarily saying,
I think we have information that's historical.
Yeah.
Mhm,
So I think that information we have.
yeah.
So to share that is no problem at all. 2026 and 2027, there is a plan that's out there that I can tell you that one of those out years, big numbers will agree with the big number that we will share with you. So I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that.
Yeah.
But I don't, as far as telling you what the plan would be, I don't know that I could tell you that in any honest way in a week. I think that
Yeah.
kind of defeats the purpose of what we're trying to achieve here.
And I'm not trying to throw a bomb in this process, so I just don't want it
So
to get lost.
That's like, I think that if that was my goal, I think I would be like self-defeating on day one. So I don't really, in a
The
week, I
message-
can give you all that, but
I
I
think
can
the
give you
message
what we
that-
have.
Yeah.
Could I add one quick thing? Yeah, I hear you, Karen. I agree. I think what Commissioner Rhodey is saying is that we've heard talk about this for a couple of years. So I am hearing just a desire to see it, understanding that it's a ways out or has to be talked about. So just seeing it, I think, would help.
Yes, and one other thing too is, so just because we passed the CIP right now that has future years, laid out, doesn't mean that next year, when we come back to approving the CIP, those future years can't be adjusted, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so we can figure this out. I just am hoping it becomes a priority.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the message on this, as I'm listening to this, is that you have commissioners that think this is really important. So
Yeah,
let's
no,
not drop the ball over the next 12 months.
No, and I think I've been specific about trying to engage each of you, even individually, so that we can talk about future plans and future goals. So if that wants to be a part of one of our conversations where, you can come to the office and take a look at what we have, like I said, it's very preliminary. So I guess I'd be hesitant to publish it as gospel at this point. But if you want to see what we're talking about and see kind of the scope of what we're thinking, I don't have any problems having those conversations individually.
Eric, it seems to me that you're the trigger point on this. So if it's a priority, if it's really important to you, right?
Yeah.
And you see the need, because you're the closest to the action.
Yeah.
Then you got to make sure that administration knows, and then you got to keep us in the loop.
Yep.
Because we want to support, the perception is this is a need, but you've got to keep us in the forefront.
Sure.
And so this board's receptive to that.
No, like I said, we had just finished up our action plan with DSI. I put it out to my employees last week. It's in that as well. So I will be sure to share that in the coming days with you as well, so that you understand what my priorities are in the next couple of years going forward. And then, yeah, we'll work through that process I mean, it was submitted again this year when we put in our CIP. So it hasn't fallen off any board anywhere yet. It's just whether or not I sit in a place where I know what my priorities are, but I know that there's only so much money in the county and it has to be spent wisely. So I defer at that point to the CIP, and I like to inform that process. I've got a lot of things that are going to be needed in the next few years. And so you're going to see me a lot. And so I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and we're all doing what's responsible. Like Commissioner Bonomus said, that we're responsible to the people of the county. So.
Appreciate that, Eric.
Thank you.
I think what we've wanted to do is not make the board or this committee reactionary. I really think they should make decisions based on information, based on the department head or elected officials' needs, the community's needs. And I think this is the right process to do that, and versus just giving a presentation and everybody going, God, we got to do this now.
Right.
And I think we'll get there. And I think the sheriff will be instrumental in that.
Thank
Sounds
you.
good.
Thank you.
Let's move on. Karen? Gary?
I'd like to start this off just a little bit. Each commissioner received a couple memos that are drafted. The first one is dated August 1st. This is what each department head that received personnel in this budget received from me. It kind of explains the process. And as I had told some of them during our meetings with them, that I spent 24 years spending county money. And now I'm kind of sitting on the other side of the fence trying to tell them that they can't spend money. And so it's been an extremely impressive process for me, watching Karen and her staff prepare a final report that the board has got in front of them. One of the things we did, I don't want to say we probably gave more positions than we should have, because I think each department head, each elected official that made requests did a good job of explaining why they needed the positions that were granted. The difference going into this coming budget is for next budget preparation, not only did they have to explain it to get the positions, but they're going to have to explain what they've accomplished with those positions. And I think that's going to be good. So the new county administrator sees that. I think it's going to be good because not that we're holding their feet to the fire, but we really believe that there has to be some goals for new staff that they receive. And I think they fully understand that. And again, I think that'll be a good process for them. The other draft that you have here, and it's dated October 1st, because that's when the new budget will take place. And nobody has received this memo as of this point, but it talks about mandatory and discretionary funding. Jacob, you and I have had several conversations as it relates to this, and we agreed that we would wait until they move into FY26, and we're going to give them like a 6-month period to work through this process. It'll give a tool that they'll have in their hand to sit down with the new county administrator and go over their departments with him or her, and be able to identify, the services that they provide that are mandatory, and those things that the county board has gifted those organizations with over the years to provide additional services for our residents. And those are the things that, we talk about when we go to seminars, we go meet with our counterparts across the state. What are they doing over and above just some of the mandatory requirements that we have for our various offices? So again, the last time this was done was in 2018. I've looked over that product. Again, that was a very good product, but we also know that we have some new elected officials and stuff that I just happen to think, because I've been through this process a couple times, that you pull your hair out a little bit, but at the end of the project, it's a good thing to do. And I think they'll come out the other side even stronger, as providing service to the county. So those are those two items.
I just want to thank you for prioritizing that like you said you would. So just thank you for doing that.
Again, you've got a significant product in front of you for this year's budget. And I can't say enough about where we started on day one. I think our first budget hearing was with Joe Bush. And I thought, well, that was relatively easy. Well, bring everybody on. And, but again, they all have a variety of needs and interests, and they all come to the table with wanting to provide just a little bit more with the resources they have. So Karen, all yours.
So I'm going to start with the presentation, and then at the end, it does walk through the packet a little bit, but I'll start with the presentation first. So the 26 recommended budget. So first we'll talk about some budget basics and defining success, and then some estimation that we do. And we'll get into the actual numbers and some highlights and what comes next. Okay, so, oh boy, this slide is jump right out at all this accounting. We prepare the budget based on the Uniform Budget and Accounting Act. So I promise the rest of the presentation is not this boring. The only requirements for in that act is that the budget for the general fund and special revenue funds. It's the only ones they require. And so that's the top two. We have historically always done debt service and capital projects. And this year, we're also suggesting that we add delinquent tax fund. The reason they're making a transfer to the debt service related to our 2015 refunding bonds, so that helping with that debt service payment. This fund has historically helped with debt service, and there's been a transfer out to the debt service. It's historically helped. We've just not, it's always shown in the debt service fund, but because it's not required, we've not formally adopted it with the board. There is, in our system, we budget all the funds for management purposes. So there is a budget in every single fund. And so, but we've always historically only brought forward and had the board adopt what the board's required to adopt, plus the debt service and capital project. We're just suggesting we add the delinquent tax fund this year. And just because we're accountants, we reconcile everything. And below the blue line, if you go to reconcile our financial statements, there are other funds, and those are that, and I'm not even going to talk about them. Kind of, if you're looking at our funds overall, I just want to also point out that a special revenue fund dollar is not the same as a debt service dollar, is not the same as a general dollar. You can't move money around these buckets. There are a lot of rules. So a Medicaid dollar, special revenue Medicaid dollar, cannot be used the same as a general dollar. I mean, kind of goes without saying, but so it's just kind of keep that in mind. I know there's a lot of people don't think about funds or maybe don't like funds, accounting funds, or it makes it more confusing with all this money moving around, but there's a reason for it. The reason is because there's different rules that apply. And so just kind of keeping that in mind in the background, that every dollar may not be the same. Okay, so defining success when we're putting the budget together. So we always shoot for being compliant with all of the financial policies that are approved and established by this board, and that the budget is balanced, that the debt and all of our liabilities are funded, that services and programs are funded. And all of this is really done under the guise of the AAA bond rating. So a lot of that foundation was put in place well before I started, and decisions that were made by boards and people that were here long before I got here. And so long before, long before, maybe not, maybe Gary's first round. But so those things were here. And so a lot of that is that financial structure that we respect, and that is just kind of built into some of the ways that we think about money and the way that we approach the budgeting process. So what does it mean when a budget is balanced? And we talk about this a little bit more later, but the budget's balanced when the use of reserves plus revenue equal expenses. It's just that simple, balanced. So estimates and assumptions that we made during the budget process. So tax value growth. So taxable values grow, hopefully every year. And there's a portion of that that's inflation and portion of that that's growth, new growth, new development. And so we work treasury, equalization, work together with fiscal, and we make some projections. And we, in 2026, are assuming that our tax values will grow 5.75. So those actually we won't know that until next May, April, May, but we're assuming that those tax values will grow 5.75. That's a combination of 3% new growth and 2.75 inflation. The millage rate for county operating millage unchanged at 3.9 mils. Cost of living, we made an assumption of 3%. Some of those are contracts, and then there are two unions that are currently will need to be negotiated. The two new unions, the public health and CMH, did a 1-year contract. So at 12/31/25. So those will be negotiated. But that's an assumption that we put in the budget, not knowing what will be negotiated in that contract. But that's the assumption that we made across the board for all wages. Health insurance increases, we did 3% as of 1/1/26, and we'll see how that turns out as well. We made some assumptions on ongoing grant revenue. If we knew something wasn't gonna happen, we did remove it. But we did make the assumption, Friend of the Court is funded by 4D. We have some ongoing programs that are funded by federal grants. And so those programs rely on that money. And so we made those assumptions that that is continuing. Contract increases, this is normal business. Contracts go up. Sometimes it's built right in. We have 3 or sometimes multi-year contracts, and we know the amount. Sometimes it's the last year and we don't know, but there's assumptions made during the budgeting process where we estimate. Sometimes we're on and sometimes we miss, but we manage throughout the process to fund those things as we go. New this year is in those new position approvals. Some of the positions were made contingent. Some of those approvals were contingent. So we spent a lot of time talking about new positions during the fiscal year. Last year, when we approved positions, we didn't approve some because we wanted the grant to get approved before we approved them. And so we brought them back to the board once we had formal documentation that the grant had been approved. And so it required to come back to the board. In other cases, we approved them assuming that everything was fine. And then we had to freeze them because everything changed. And so this year we made them contingent upon something happening. As something happened, we outlined exactly what that was. And then in the background, we identified specifically and we'd like to move forward so that each position wouldn't have to come back to the board. However, there will be a process, which there is anyways, for a position to be posted so that it could move business along. However, there isn't a process in which those approvals will take place before a position is posted. So that's kind of new this year. Okay, so millage rates and assumptions. So, this is, the millage rates the same as 2025, but this is all of the millage rates that are part of the budget. So the general operating, we've already talked about. So our original authorized millage rate for general operating is the 4.44. As of current maximum allowable, because it's been rolled back, is 4.2023. We're assuming the millage rate we used in the budget was 3.9. That means we're levying less than the authorized amount. So we would be under what we're authorized. The other special millages are authorizing, they're at their maximum and we use the same amount in the budget. The road improvement, that one, just went back to the voters for a continuation at that 0.4722. And that one did start out initially at 0.50. So when they went back, they just asked for a continuation. So they continued on at their rolled back amount. So just as a way of, but that one now is expiration date is out in 12/31/34 based on that most recent approval.
Karen, is CMH listed incorrectly? Should it be next year, actually, 12/31/26?
No, that tax year, this is their last tax year. So
Okay.
that expiration date is tax year. So this is their last tax year. Their tax bills will go out in December. And so their current maximum allowable of 2802 will fund their fiscal year 26 budget.
Okay, thank you.
So this is its tax year funding their 26 budget.
Thanks for that clarification.
So coming back to the general operating tax and levying less than the amount authorized, the board, has saved the taxpayers approximately $5.7 million by levying that less than the authorized amount. So that point, whatever that small percentage there is actually worth $5.7 million. I think when we talked about the truth in taxation, Ottawa County is one of 7 counties that levies less than their authorized maximum. So out of the 83, it changes a little bit every year.
1 of 7.
1 of 7
That's great.
from 2024 data. So, okay, fine, the total county budget. So this is based on those funds that we talked about in the very beginning, the total fiscal year 26 recommended budget is $305,340,437. And that is a 7.7 increase from 2025, which is 21.5 million higher than 2025. Without the delinquent tax fund that we added, it would be, 7.2% higher. So the delinquent tax fund is just about $1 million that wasn't in the 2025 budget at all. So just a little variance there.
Can you hit that one again? Can you repeat that slide for us?
Repeat that.
That's what you just said. Can you do it again?
So, yeah, without the delinquent tax funds, about $1 million. So without the delinquent tax fund in the 2026, like comparing apples to apples between 25 and 26, it would be a 7.2% increase. But because we added the delinquent tax fund in 26, it's 7.7% increase.
In the budget. is
In
what
the
you-
budget.
That's what that chart. Okay, good. Thank you.
So looking at the budget in a different way, we excluded the transfers between and just looked at how the budget is made up. Health and welfare represents almost twice the budget of public safety, and combined, they represent 61% of the total county budget. So looking at the different areas of how the county funding, that $305 million is spent, just from recreation and culture to public works and public safety. It's just a different way of looking at how we spend our money. And where does all that money come from? Countywide, 45% comes from intergovernmental revenue. So this is things like grants and Medicaid. So state funding, 32% countywide comes from taxes. So those taxes are from parks, CMH, the general operating. So countywide, you have all of our taxes. So it's all of the millage. If you compare that to general fund is much more reliant on taxes. It includes, obviously, the general operating. It also includes roads and dispatch are in the general fund, and they pass through to the component units. So, but 62% of general fund is reliant on taxes. And I just think that's as compared to 32% countywide. So any change in taxes is going to impact the general fund and those that rely on the general fund at a higher rate than, say, countywide. So when you think about the impact on taxes or a decline in maybe tax values or anything like that, it's going to potentially hit general fund or those that rely on general fund at a greater rate because of just the reliance on that as a revenue source. So, and how do we spend our money? And I think this was mentioned earlier, but we are a service organization, so it's not a surprise that half or 44% were salary and benefits countywide, and that contractual services is really, a lot of that is CMH, client care. So that is also services provided within the county. Even in the general fund, it's very similar. 48% is people providing services. That's what we are. So this budget, looking at it, I think a little bit different than just percentages in dollars. What does it do? What are some of the changes that you've seen? We're supporting the workforce. We have a we had the new positions, so that is, $3.3 million was new positions, and 6 million is in current pay for current staffing. So we saw some changes in our workforce recommended. We also have a wage study underway, and so there is funding set aside for potential implementation for the wage study. We have investments in parks grants, so the support of capital projects, and public health has grant changes, so there's an increase in Medicaid cost-based reimbursement. There's the grant for the software for the food programs. So I think they talked about that software to implement the new food programming that has been discussed, that we carried over the amount because I don't think that's going to be implemented in time. So we carried over that grant. And because it wasn't in the adopted budget this year, we're always comparing adopted to adopted. So it shows as an increase. And then $125,000 grant increase for hearing and vision. There's increases in children's specials, health, and immunization. And then there's also increase in materials management grant, that planning grant for the implementation of the new state program in materials management. So the budget also includes estimates for the new solid waste ordinance that is going to be introduced shortly. So we've included those estimates in this budget. So that will be introduced to the board soon, but that estimate, that assumption is in this budget.
What assumption did you use, the 1% or the 5%?
The
Joe?
$1.
Yeah, right.
$1.
20.
$5.
$1.
Okay, got it.
There is additional support for CAA. So Community Action Agency historically has not received general fund support, and this year, due to they really have a grant that's called CSBG. Do not ask me the long name for it, because I don't know it. But they have it's a 2-year grant that historically has lasted mostly 2 years, or we've been able to carry over and spend it, stretch to 2 years. Well, that has the dynamics of the spending and availability to support staffing. It's the one that they generally can use to support staff, because there are other programs, while they love to provide programmatic support, don't always want to pay for staff to do the programs. CSBG is one that's been able to do that. That grant, just based on other increases that they've seen, is not enough funding to pay for the staff to do the programs. So while they've done an analysis of those programs and have made some minor changes, they're not able to do that. So this budget recommends a less than 300,000, 280 something thousand increase transfer to Community Action Agency. So that's new. Community Action Agency, I know that you've had a number of departments stand before you and say, we are the only who have stood and don't take any general fund, or don't, I think, pay our own way. I've sat back and listened. Community Action Agency is probably the only department who's ever could stood up and honestly say that to you. There's always something where maybe we don't charge somebody the full cost plan. Maybe the courts pay it instead of charging a grant, or there's usually something that somebody is receiving over and above. Community Action Agency, truly, they have stood completely independently up until this year. So this is a change that's in the budget, and support for their programming based on what they're seeing in their grant to pay for the staffing to provide the programs. And then some modernization of operations. So there's the capital investment at the landfill. There's a, well, currently budgeted is $1 million. And we're finding out that that may be a low investment, that may be a low estimate. But currently what's budgeted is $1 million investment at the Southwest Ottawa landfill. So, but we're reviewing, and that's still under discussion about exactly what that estimate will be and how that will move forward. We also have the sheriff's office implementation of a 3-district model, which is a supervision of some staffing and how his officers deliver that daily work. He would probably be much better to explain exactly how that rolls out in his operation, but it's a fairly large change in the way he delivers service. Transitioning in-car and body camera contract to an operational cost. So as I mentioned before, this was an insurance authority grant. And so we're making that a general fund contract. And so just the way it shows up in your budget, it looks like a large ad, the way that it came out of the capital improvement plan and is now in the general fund. And then just an increase both in parks and in the county projects of capital projects spending. So you'll see between Southwest Ottawa landfill and the county making an investment in that, some of those projects, that building automation system required the funding, and just trying to get some of those things so we could complete some of those projects. So back to that accounting and budgeting. So uniform budgeting accounting categories showing the budget in totals with reserves. So the revenues plus reserves equal appropriations. The budget is balanced. I wanted to talk for a minute about the use of reserves. So the general fund and the capital project fund are both using reserves. The general fund has $2,924,778 listed there as a use of reserves. Historically, so that represents $2 million of department underspend, and $924, the remaining balance, is planned use. So it's money that the board has set aside, similar to board initiatives, but it's the Water Conservation District. It's that, it's the Soil Conservation District. It's they're doing some testing with that, lawsuit that came in with it was a lawsuit. It was the
Monsanto?
Say that again?
Monsanto?
Monsanto, thank you. Thank you. Monsanto, I couldn't come up with the name. Monsanto funding. So there was it's a contract. It was a 5-year contract. So it's using some of that money that came in prior years. It's in, our fund balance. And so now for spending it, you're using reserves. So the board had set that money aside, and it's also funding 2 positions in the Water Resource Commissioner's office. So again, that money is, so that's what we call a planned use of reserves. So that's an example of the 924,000. The 2 million portion of that is what we set aside as we call it department underspend. And so historically, this amount has been $1 million. This year, we've moved that to 2 million. And this is really because what we're seeing is, due to the change we made in the fund balance policy, where the unrestricted portion of fund balance in all of the special revenue funds mostly public health and childcare is coming back to the general fund at the end of each year. We're seeing their underspend come back to the general fund. So we're getting more money back in the general fund. So this becomes one-time money. So we're getting that money. And so we historically use this as an underspend so we can end closer to where we want to be and not get money back. So we can say yes more instead of trying to make reductions and then people underspending because it's almost impossible to spend your whole budget. Although some people try to come close. But so what we found is that we got about $1 million back. And so as that changes, we're recommending moving that million to 2 million. So, and departments still continue to obviously underspend even as their budgets grow. So, I always like to go over this because I know appropriating fund balance, especially in the general fund, can make people nervous, but this is a concept that we've talked about with the rating agencies. It's, they're familiar with it. They're comfortable with our approach. I talked about changing it from 1 million to 2 million and the reasons why with our financial advisor. And and he was supportive, thinking the thought pattern, and, we haven't had a call yet, but, because the thought pattern is there, because the data is there, did not see any issue that we would have any issue with that. So, I think that's the 2.9 versus historically you might have only seen 1.9 there. And then the capital projects funds, we are using fund balance in the county capital projects funds. And that is to fully fund the projects in 2026. And because some of the underspend that we have seen in recent years, making that recommendation moving forward, that we would reinvest that underspend into capital projects in the coming months. So kind of getting some projects funded, getting some things moving, and then turning around and making some recommendations to reinvest some of that money that has been given back into that process. So then looking forward, so what are some things on, maybe this is like kind of my to-do list, or what I'm looking forward to. Like we spent some time with departments. One of the things we asked for, one of our goals during this process that we talked to every department about, was their rates and fees. And what we found was things that we have control over have not been adjusted in a while. So maybe before COVID. And so during COVID, we didn't do a lot of rate adjustments. As a matter of fact, if we're anything, we may have, tried to get people to do things electronically and gave discounts for, trying to get people online or doing things electronically as opposed to changing rates in the other way. So, and then after, we just have not gone back and looked at things. So we want to circle back around with those discussions and some of those things when departments were looking at their rates and fees. And so we haven't made any adjustments in the budget except for some of the larger ones. I know we did we did talk about, there is a bed rental at the juvenile detention center that was on a 3-year, but with some of the adjustments in pay, just the staffing it takes to run and the programs, there is a rate change there that I think supports that. And so those are larger, impact that operation pretty significantly. So, but the others, you'll see those potentially coming forward. So circling back, so that's kind of on our to-do list. We also get our our DB actuary report, just as we're delivering or wrapping up the budget, it kind of sets the 27 rate. So it kind of gives me a sneak peek at what our MERS will be next year. And if I run that number through our payroll for this year, it would have been 3% higher. And it really rolled in that 2022 loss. So it kind of is fully operationalizing some of those economic impacts, market impacts. So we usually have an annual meeting with them. So I want to have that kind of a discussion because there are some things in the background, and I think the board in 2019 kind of came up with a plan and did some extension of our amortization period surrounding that and adjusted taxes. They moved it from the 3.6 to the 3.9 and dedicated that 0.3 mils to this effort. And so I think there's a check-in, and MERS generally does they will do a projection for you. And so maybe doing that check-in, having that conversation, and seeing where we stand with that projection, and then taking a look with some of those losses that we've recently incurred, especially the most recent one. So taking another look at that. And then we've already spent a fair amount of time talking about the strategic plan for capital. Those I've listed here, just a number of projects that came up probably since we completed the plan that aren't in the plan that probably need to be taken into consideration. That third from the bottom, projects submitted by elected officials and departments are things that are on that line, but there's a number of other things that have already come up and, I think come up pretty much on a daily basis of things that people think about. So we've talked about that. And then the excess general fund balance. So the general fund policy, the fund balance policy for the general fund states that the county will maintain 20 to 25% of unassigned fund balance in the general fund. So as we accumulate, pull back, and maintain that 20 to 25% in the general fund, what that means is that if we don't have enough, the policy talks about what we need to do and the steps we need to take to bring it up to that amount. And then if you have excess, the policy talks about what you might consider doing with the excess. Thinking about your capital, thinking about, future things that you could pay to reduce liabilities. The things basically 1, 2, and 3 maybe would be some of the things that it might strongly suggest considering and making some recommendations of what to do with the excess fund balance. So you do the calculation at the end of the year because that's when you measure. So at the end of 24, there's about 13.5 million, $13.9 million excess fund balance over the 25%. So if we're required to have 20 to 25%, the 25% is 13.9 million. So that recommendation needs to come back to the board. And that was one of those things that spending down the capital projects fund balance, knowing that you come back and get some of those projects going and get them funded. And then this would be one of the things that.
Set the 25%, Karen. Is that something that the board did at one time, or does MERS do it? Who's setting the 25%?
Yeah, it was a policy. It's a policy that was passed by the board.
Okay.
It was based on a recommendation. It's based on risk. So there's an assessment based on risk. So, and your ability to respond. So, changes in the economy. So because we have a stabilization fund, because we have the insurance authority, you look at things like that. If you lived in an area where you had hurricanes every year, you might have a higher, so you have to look at your situation and your risk and your ability to respond to those risks and kind of decide what you need to maintain on hand. So it's that kind of an assessment. And
Does-
then you make that
Does
recommendation.
that affect the AAA bonding too or not?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and then, so coming back and making that recommendation, so that's an item kind of on my to-do list based on this budget of coming back and making that recommendation to take that excess fund balance and, having that conversation about, where the best use is, how it should be used.
So we weren't going bankrupt.
Sorry?
I said, so we weren't going bankrupt.
Oh, in 23 and 24, a lot, 24, there was $8 million of unspent. So when departments don't spend their budget, or when you have vacancies or vacancy savings, and I guess, it comes from other funds or where, comes from public health or childcare, or that money that comes back, it turns into one-time money. Because if they're not spending their budget, and it's not the special revenue funds, so think about it, it can't be Medicaid dollars because those stay Medicaid dollars. So it has to be general fund dollars. But it turns into one-time money because if the program continues, you can't invest it in new positions. Because next year they would probably fill all their positions. But if you have a vacancy or turnover, there's a natural cost. It naturally happens. It's to some degree, it's natural. But to what degree is the question? But we've always had it. I mean, it's a very natural thing to have. 24 was higher when we pulled the money back from public health in 24. And then at the end of the year, they had more, and so did childcare. So it was like 2 years in one. So when we changed the policy, and then and then we pulled all the accumulation back, and then it happened at the end of the year again. So there was like almost multiple years there in one. So. Okay, so in your packet, so talking through some of the things that you'll see in your packet, that was attached to the agenda item was the fiscal year budget summary. So that box, with the actual budget, and then, the fund descriptions. So what we gave you was a list of all of the fund names and a description of what's in each fund, because you may not have that kind of detail or that background. And then revenues by department. And we also gave expenses by department. For comparison purposes, in the expenses, we included the delinquent tax fund, which means that at the total of expenses by department, it isn't going to tie out to the 2025 adopted budget, because the 2025 includes the delinquent tax fund too. We had to make the decision. We showed you the delinquent tax fund, but we gave you the 2025 too. So because it wasn't in the 2025 adopted budget, but it was in our system when we gave that to you, the 2025 adopted budget doesn't tie out to what you adopted last year, if that makes sense. So, the personnel requests with recommendations and the contingencies are noted. So a whole list there that's with the recommendation column, what got recommended, what did not. So this is all in the table of contents. There's a general fund summary. So there's all your general fund, but the general fund, we went one step further. And under each major category, we wanted to highlight the changes. So you could see each change, so of each area. So contractual services, for example, would give you some of the major changes that occurred in contractual services. And then each other made all the other fund summaries. No, we didn't highlight every change in all of the fund summaries, but we did in the general fund. So then the next steps is after the presentation we talked about, then there would be, if there's budget work sessions, they'd be scheduled through the 19th. And then the CIP would be on the 26th, as we talked about earlier, that the public hearing currently would be on the calendar for September 2nd. And then on September 9th, Finance Committee at the Finance Committee meeting would be a recommendation to see the budget as after the public hearing. That would make that final recommendation to the board on September 23rd for approval. And then October 1st is when the fiscal year starts. So September 30th is New Year's Eve. Are there questions?
Good. Couple quick questions. You mentioned a 3% increase on health insurance costs. Just curious, did you get guidance from providers on that? That number it seems low.
So it's early in the data to get the guidance. They don't usually have information to give us that. So what I can say is that when in prior years we've done 3%, the contracts have a section that has a group that gets together. Anything over 3%, a group of employees, and there's a name for this, and I forget the name, I'm sorry. They come together and they look at the plan design and they can make changes, but anything over a 3% increase is shared by the employer and the employee. So if they look at the plan design and it ends up to be 5%, the 2% is shared, so it'll be 1% for the county and 1% for the employee. Historically, we have found that the plan design changes help. And then we also find that what we don't, and maybe this won't continue, I don't know, but historically we found that we've been able to manage with the we've been able to cover health insurance with the 3%. And the one year I did ask, they told me it would be 10%. And I almost killed myself trying to get 10% in the budget.
I was on another
And it
board at
came
that
in like
time.
at
It was
2. I was like so mad.
Needless to say, the county works extremely hard to
Yes,
keep that 3%.
they work very hard to get.
Seems like the health
that
department
right.
respects us when they give us that bid year after year. It's just kind of what they come in at, right?
And they should.
They're right,
They
correct.
should.
Because we still got the threat that we can be self-funded anytime they get too high.
And we're not afraid to make changes if needed. So it's a
Historically, we've worked that very hard.
well-balanced relationship.
Exactly.
Question
And
I
it will
had is,
remain that way.
how would you describe your level of concern that we don't have a state budget yet?
That you don't have a what?
A state budget.
I think we'll have a state budget. I think it'll be work October. I think a lot of people get worried. I think we'll have to do some things in my office as it gets closer and closer to October 1st,
Okay.
as people get worried and they start asking a bunch of questions, but I think we'll have a budget.
It's not by trouble.
If there was a partial government shutdown at the state level, how would that affect your office's operations? Would that affect revenues significantly?
It would affect some offices a great deal. It would, yeah, it would affect some offices a great deal, which is why as it gets closer and closer, it will be a lot of work because everybody will start asking those questions about which offices and we'll be trying to figure out who's impacted and who isn't and what's happening and who's funded and who isn't. And then they'll pass it or something. That's what happened last time.
Yep, yeah. Sounds,
So I should say,
Thank you.
I shouldn't jinx it, but that's what happened last time. It was a lot of work and then they passed it.
Thank you.
I have a question. I think other people may have too, but I'll just be the one to throw it out there. The CSBG grant changes and some of those is about 300,000 a year in general fund next year. Are we talking about a one-time 300,000 or are we talking about a 10-year? It's really more like a $3 million decision by allocating general fund. I want to make sure that we are looking ahead to what that decision means.
I think it will be multi-year.
That's my understanding as well. And so seeing that, I mean, I know there's been much deeper budget discussions, so maybe I can follow up on this later and look at some detail, but I just wanted the board to be cognizant of that. You know, we are not just doing a one-time 283,000 or whatever. It's a fairly long-term commitment to CAA.
Going off of that, Karen or Gary, can you share with us any problem solving or conversations that have taken place before it came to the level of asking the board to consider it to be taken out of the general fund from here on out? Were there any other thoughts that were put on the table that you'd be willing to share with the board?
Well, I think it's gonna have to be something that's looked at down the road and to see if where the county's at as far as prioritizing the impact that that group has in the county. We, you know, as we talk about service levels and things of that nature, you know, that's always been the process is how long do we salvage a program that outside funding mechanisms have been in place to establish it? And, I can think of a number over the years that were grant-filled positions like our school resource officers and stuff like that, that we continued to pick up and we've continued to fund for the last 20 years. And, again, I think when that happens, you got to take a look at, the type of service, the level of service and things of that nature. So.
Is there a possibility of, if the board chooses to go this route for this year, to put a little bit of extra money to maybe doing a little bit of a study, so to speak, of if it's in the best interest of the people to have the county continue to take it on, or if it would be something that would be better tailored to each individual township. It might not look the same, or nonprofits. So that no quick decision takes place right now for a program that our county has supported, but something that we would gain a little bit of a better understanding of the different options that it can perform at its best, and that the services wouldn't be lacking to our community, but maybe there are other ways of looking at it. And I don't think that we are going to have a full understanding as we're sitting here to look at a budget.
I did a quick, just view of, there aren't, I mean, some of them are operated independently, but there are a few that are part of counties that I could easily see. And the ones that are part of counties, it's not uncommon to receive support from their county. So I did do just but nothing in depth, right? So nothing to the depth of what you're speaking.
Yeah.
So-
And I'm looking at two different approaches. One, studying the actual community action agency itself, but then looking at also the merit of the work that is within that agency and seeing if there's a different path forward in which one our county would think is best for our community.
And that's again, one of the things that Jacob had requested as far as, mandated, types of service and
Right.
discretionary funding that the board has a decision to take a look at. And, where do you want to be with those types of organizations and that type of service in the future?
Yeah, and Karen, when you said that a few were part of counties, were the other ones like standalone organizations, or were they part of nonprofits? Do you know what they were? If they weren't part of counties?
I did not focus on those.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I agree with, as far as long-term goes, taking a look at what the best route for this is.
I'm watching you, the four of you nodding your heads, and I'm sitting there going, what the heck, right? And clearly you guys have more experience than, because I'm still asking myself, okay, explain to me Community Action Agency, right? And what all they do in the nonprofits. So this is the kind of stuff that, I don't know about the rest of these guys, but I'm feeling like I'm pretty ignorant on. So I would appreciate your help to fill me in on this as well as administration, because I'm all watching you guys and you're going like this and I'm going, you guys are talking over my head and I don't like not knowing what I don't know. And so I would appreciate you guys filling me in sometime.
I'm just wondering if this is something that, under the leadership of Paul, with strategic impact, that perhaps we could caveat some money to study this over this next year, not just relying on the impact on the input of staff. I do think it should be some additional funding should be spent to really study it well.
And from where I'm coming from on this, so when I was doing social work, I could really see the value of these kinds of programs coming in and alongside families to help them with some of these critical needs, because sometimes you have moms with kids who, I mean, these are very urgent needs, so that's not to minimize the need at all. But some of that work is very nonprofit work. And it does remind me much more of nonprofit work than traditional, perhaps county work. It's not, I don't think it's mandated. So I like the idea of having strategic planning take a look at it. And I think there's probably a place for it somewhere, in our county that like these needs do need to be met, but what's the best avenue? And is it the responsibility of county government? I think those things need to be answered.
Those are really good questions, and I'd be happy to talk more, John, on some details. One of the questions I have is related to kind of the locale of where the work is done. I guess 90% of the work being done in Holland and Zealand. I don't know. And then the other one that's maybe more to the point is if the general fund is going to cover 300,000 or whatever this year, 350 next year, 400 next year, 500, if it's going to continue to grow, what piece of CAA is that funding? Because a lot of it, I think, is grant funded. So this is, okay, it's 300,000. It's not a small number, but in the terms of the overall budget, it's small. So is that 300,000 that we're committing to long-term potentially, which piece of CAA is it going to contribute to? Because when you look at the programs within it, it's very grant funded. It's always been grant funded. So is that $300,000 piece, is it better to just remove that and continue the remainder of the budget, the 2.7 million or whatever is in the budget? It's just a very, I think, common sense question.
And if I could build on that for a second, when we're out in DC at NACO, we had a chance to sit with our congressman and address this specific need because there's a lot of cuts that were happening at that time. And where are the cuts going? How far to the bone and beyond the bone will they go? And at that time, our congressman didn't know the whole answer either. There's a lot going on. But his recommendation to us to carry back to our department heads that are in this situation, asking these questions, is to prepare themselves for cuts and then be thankful if it doesn't happen. But prepare yourself so that, one of the things that we do as leaders is to provide stability. That's what our community wants to see. That's what our business leaders want us to provide them so that they can plan. And, I think what we're doing here is saying, administration, identify the mandated programs, identify the non-mandated programs so that we can have meaningful conversations about what is the highest and best use of these funds. There are a lot of families that benefit from Community Action Agency. They do. They need to know how to plan going forward if those funds are not there to provide stability in their lives. So we have very valuable and talented employees that are working in this space. We owe it to them to give us a report of, what are they doing with the funds? Who are they serving? It should be measurable benefit. It should be relatable benefit so that it can be repeatable into the community so that people can see the reason why we're allocating these tax dollars to this program is because it has this exponential benefit to the community. And I think they're up for that challenge. They have relied very heavily on grants. Now it looks like that may change. Now, we were also told that while these cuts may take place this year, there may be a relook at these situations and funding brought back in again. So that may change next year or the following year as we go through this process. So I think we need to be prepared that this problem may solve itself through a situation like that as well.
If I could just add something, Jennifer Brzezowski could not be here this week. I'm sure she, if she's able, is watching this discussion right now and would love to weigh in. If we can get into this at the next Finance Committee meeting, perhaps, I think she could give you a lot of background. It might be helpful.
Yeah, and I would love to know too, obviously, some grants were cut. So what was the thinking behind that? And is, she getting a sense? That'd be great if they do bring them back next year, problem solved. But it would be really nice to get a sense of that too, How solid is this decision and might it come back?
And we should, we can bring all those details back. And I think I don't have the full picture here.
Yeah.
I know that when we chatted with her, one of the other things I'm just sitting here thinking is, we've seen increases in our indirect costs. That's our overhead that we charge to grants that is allowable under federal. And so as, HR, fiscal administration, all of those overhead costs increase and we charge grants, she has, oh, there might be a couple grants that don't allow it or limit it. And I'm just trying to remember the details. And so this grant there's just a lot of pressure being put on where it has to be paid. And so, you know, instead of taking the indirect costs out, I said, well, to fully charge and then to give the general fund, which we do in other cases as well. We do this in other areas. And so, you know, it feels a little disingenuous to, you know, I don't know. I just want to make sure you hear the full what's causing it, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want it to be growth in other areas and payroll that is causing this change, right?
So are you saying perhaps some of it is a little bit that the
I think-
overall overhead of the county has increased and
Mhm.
so the allocation to that department is
Yes.
making it harder?
Yes.
Okay.
And the impact of what is eligible under the grants, yes. It's always been a challenge. And then with the increase, it's always been a challenge, but then with the increase and based on what the grants allow, I think it's causing extreme challenge.
Makes sense.
Are the grants covering about 90% of the program?
I can't.
It seemed
That's
like
why I
it
want to, that's
was.
why I want to give you, that's why I
Yeah.
want to wait to be able to give you a full, because
Okay,
I don't have all that detail.
okay,
I
all
don't,
right,
and I'm mislead.
okay.
Can we go through some maybe of the personnel requests a little bit? I guess the very top one, I would love to hear about the communications specialist request. That would be my first question. We can go through, I have a few more, but that'd be my first one.
I can probably explain that one a little bit. One of the things that we've continued to see is all the department heads having an interest to do something as it relates to communications. We thought that the health department and the sheriff's department is a little unique based on their size and the types of information they get out. But everybody else still has an interest in how do they best communicate with the general public, newsletters, periodicals, the annual reports, the website and stuff like that. So what we did, we started looking at the idea, we could virtually have every department having their own communication specialists and graphics budget to put together these fine reports that everybody does nowadays compared to just running a copy off a copy machine. So what we did, we looked at that position, the same as we looked at some other ones I'll explain to you, and said, how can we best afford department heads that type of service? So we started looking at what we currently have going on with Shannon and a lot of the communication stuff that she does. If we could take a position and then offer it to full use to all the other department heads, but it would come through the administrator's office as a person working in that area with Shannon. And that maybe the clerk's office or HR would come and see that person and say, how can you help me, produce this type of document for the general public? How can you help me get more of my information out, through social media and various things like that? And so that was the decision that we were going to try that if we could do it from a central office. Ron and I come from the time when we had our own printing department in the county. And, you'd go through the county administrator's office for everything. So instead of, everybody wanting their own person. We thought if we could have a county focused person, they could eventually give direction for the department heads. Same type of thing that we really looked at doing with the motor pool. You know, we currently contract through Enterprise for the sheriff's fleet and the county fleet of cars. Well, again, the sheriff's operation is a little unique because of the type of vehicles and the type of equipment that they carry in their cars. But outside of the sheriff's office, who has a fleet manager, everybody is dabbling in the cars they have. So we sat down with Karen's staff, we met with Enterprise, and because we wanted to do things just a little bit different. In 2016, my last year here, we brokered a contract with Enterprise. It's been a very good relationship, but some things had to be cleaned up. And so what we've taken is one of Karen's staff and also through procurement, we're looking at fiscal becoming the motor pool per se. And again, it won't be left up to the health department. They may have a contact person or CMH or, Joe Bush's shop, anybody that has a county vehicle, and fiscal will actually manage, how we take care of all those vehicles. So again, it's not left up to individual department heads to do that. There was one other one we emphasized within that group as well. Joe, I think, what was it?
Drones?
Oh, the drones. We had different department heads that asked for drones. They didn't necessarily ask for new people, but they asked for drones. And we said, does everybody need drones? We don't think so. So we started looking at the idea, somebody with Scott, you've seen what he can produce if, he's given the time to. We talked about, the utilization of interns. Administration has an intern budgeted in 25. We hadn't taken the time to bring that person on, but we said if we could take that intern and another intern, we could get a college student for 12 months and maybe to work with Scott to see how effective it is, but have departments go through the administrator's office if they need some, drone coverage to fly, with the drains for the water resource director, that maybe we could assist with that and utilize Scott. One of the things we want to do with facilities, we want to do drone flyovers so we can actually look at those air handlers when we're sitting in meetings, making some decisions what to do with facilities. So I think there's a use to it, and it's where that use is stationed, because we sure don't want to have to go to the sheriff's office, because his drone are a lot more sophisticated than the drones that we really need for, the purpose that we're looking at. And plus, he's got a fleet of operators that do other stuff, and we can't expect them to take time off their responsibilities to do stuff that's more just, for management needs and stuff like that. So that was the purpose of that and some of these other things as part of the admin budget.
It's obvious there's been a lot of thought and it sounds like communication on this. To me, it's a newer thing. I appreciate all what you've just shared. I'm wondering if perhaps, I have no idea if this is feasible or not, it would help my brain to be able to process almost seeing like what a job description would look like. Because it seemed a little bit like that's what you were kind of elaborating on, some of the things that potentially would fall under this. I had a completely different thought of what that line item meant prior to you sharing. In fact, I kind of was like, okay, we have Shannon. We had a brand new hire with Scott within this last year. And so from my first initial reaction was, why are we already doing a whole nother position? That seems like a completely different position than those two are currently doing. So again, I'm not sure how feasible it is, but if it's possible to have somewhat of a rough draft of what you're hoping for a job description to look like and to put it out for people to apply for, that would definitely help me a little bit more to justify saying, yes, that's, I think, where our money is well spent. I don't know.
I have another question along those lines too. So Shannon McGoran is no longer with us. Not that she's deceased, but she's gone and worked elsewhere. So is her position going to be filled as well in the administrator's department? So just, in considering those positions, is that one that will be refilled?
Not necessarily. I
Okay.
mean, I think we take a look at all the positions that we have and, you know, I know how I was as, the sheriff. I wanted to be as protective as I could and have as many of those services in-house. I mean, one of the things that, I think we should look at doing, and I think there's support for it, is what services can be shared with other organizations in the county. Whether it's, Justin or whether it's, HR. Does everybody need their own unique person? I happen to think that, shared services, it should be an important part of what we do at the county level. And without demonstrating and trying it, again, if there is no value in a position like this, I sure don't expect the county administrator to continue to fund it. But I also know that, if we could get one person to provide that type of service, it's better than hiring three individually into other, various departments. So.
Right.
There was another classification for Shannon's position though, right? You're
Yes.
potentially going to fill that
Yes.
one.
Yeah,
So
right.
Okay.
we didn't eliminate, there's another position.
Okay.
Can I, oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to add one more comment and say I like the idea in general of centralizing that in administration because you can avoid the duplication of cost. And the county has historically contracted a lot with outside organizations for branding and marketing and other, tech-oriented design work and things like that. If that could be reduced, those contracted services are expensive. They add up quickly. So if long-term, this could reduce those costs, it would definitely show value. Mhm.
Go ahead, Karen, you were going to say something.
I just wanted to mention, I had a question about the legal self-help specialist. We originally had it as a 0.2. I think we have I think that number should have been a 0.4. We're looking at that. I think it was a typo or, because that cost isn't right for a 0.2. So we're just checking on that to see if we have our sheet correct.
Wasn't about that, I think that is right, but it's just,
You think the 0.2 is right?
I think the 0.2 is correct. Susan, I think we'll have a better explanation of why that looks funky, because I
she's
had
the-
the same question.
She's the one we're checking with, so.
Okay,
We'll
yeah,
get
I think she'll have a good answer, because she had one for me, and I think that she'll have a good answer for you.
When
did look
does she
funky.
retire? Or she,
Never.
she's not allowed? Is that this year or is that,
Susan?
has she announced that she's retired? I'm sorry, maybe I'm mistaken.
I don't
No,
think so.
okay,
Never.
good to know.
There's a couple others that came from circuit court I noticed. that were requested in prior years as well for the same exact position. And I just wondered if maybe an explanation can just be shared about why they again were turned down. One of them was for another clerk. Another one was the probation officer recovery court. I think those were two that were requested at least last year. I didn't look into years prior.
Cost oriented.
I don't know that I have answers to those specifically, but I don't know that it's unusual.
Yeah, I didn't say it was. I just wondered if there was any dialogue on,
We talked about it. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything specific. We can talk about those, but get you back something, but it's not unusual. Lots of times
right.
you'll see 90% of the no's come back.
Wanted to do that.
You're the.
You're supposed to hit this other thing, though.
I know.
I think.
Let's go to work.
A good wrap.
My wife thought ahead.
I had it as, yeah.
Okay. This is
My two kids are.
lines.
I walked out of the boys' room and said, use it, you'll still be in it, right?
That's right.
Okay.
All right, we ready?
Ready.
All right, let's call the meeting back to order.
2 hours.
Well, I guess.
Regina, are we ready to go? All right.
Guy. Horrible.
Let's keep going. I know,
I think we're with Commissioner Miedema.
okay, Allison, keep going.
There you go, man.
I don't want, this is, I think for Gary, but it could be for Karen too. I just wondered if you could go through the line item from water resources for the stormwater field specialist, specifically about where the funding's coming from. It mentions using the Monsanto assigned fund balance and then the general fund. How much is currently in that fund balance? And is it just planned? I guess just a little explanation of that to start.
So we track this at the end of every year. It's at the back of note 1.
Okay.
And so but I think the thing that makes this a little unique is that there is a contract with the soil resource, the soil conservation district actually goes 5 years. So there's some commitments that go beyond what you would see in note 1. So the balance in note 1 shows what we actually spent. Right. And then there's commitments even beyond that. So
Are you saying that we're using some Monsanto funds to pay for the soil conservation fund?
no, that the testing, that contract with the Soil Conservation District, the 5-year testing contract. So that was a 5-year contract. The note 1 would only show after year 1 with what we've spent. So I'm just saying, like, I have a sheet that kind of tracks year 2, 3, and 4, because I know that that contract's coming back.
Yep.
And we're going to spend more. I just want to clarify that what you're going to see in note 1 is actual expenses.
Okay.
What's been spent.
Where
Like,
is
we're
that?
going to see more at the back of note 1 than
Where is note 1?
in our financial statements.
Okay. And I guess,
So if I go to, I'm just gonna, just give me 1 second. Let me open a file. I don't know. So at 2024, there was like $5.5 million remaining out of the 6.7. But, for example, there was another we had already committed to the 25 position. So that wouldn't have been at the end of 24, wouldn't have been reflective in that balance. So there was another 92,000 that I was looking at. There was also the $563,000 of the Chester Township contract that is kind of out there. So that we're looking at, the balance of that contract that I was just talking about with soil conservation would have been 716,000. So the remaining years, right? So I'm showing, we're really looking, instead of 5.5, we're really looking about 4.1.
Okay, so how I'm reading that, thank you for that information. So the projected recommendation currently is that this field specialist will tap into that 4.1 million until the 4.1 million is gone. And then after that, it'll be funded through the general fund. Am I understanding that correct?
That was the recommendation, yes.
Okay. So I guess one thing to consider as a board, I guess, to have a conversation is the Monsanto funds can be used however the board so chooses. It doesn't have to be relegated to this particular position or even within that department. And I guess one thing that I would love to consider is having perhaps a discussion item at some point to talk about that money that our county received. I know from my own perspective, I would love to see what else we could do in protecting our water here in Ottawa County and seeing what avenues we might want to use that money and potentially instead to, just like any other position that comes before us, typically it's a grant or it's by general fund, and to look at funding the field specialists in a different way at this point. But that's just perspective I just want to share at this point.
Anyone else? Joe, do you want anything? Jordan, you want to? Nothing? Anybody else?
Where are we at?
You have a question, Karen?
Oh, just general questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're no longer tied to, okay, cool. Karen, can you just kind of walk us through corporate counsel? The savings that were projected to see. I think we get 332,000 in savings due to a proposed internal position.
What page are you on, Don?
I'm on the expenses on the change sheet.
Yeah, Jordan.
Page number 13. Sorry.
My page numbers aren't the same as yours. My page numbers aren't the same. Let me go.
What header is it under?
So it's under contracted services, corporate counsel is the third from the bottom. Decrease in contract and legal counsel, which is basically savings, I understand, right? Due to proposed internal position of 332,000, which seems great, but I don't really know how we would achieve that much savings.
Means we spent too much in attorney fees so far.
Well, we could just not have any attorneys, right, John? There we go.
Well, we need attorneys, we just spent too much.
Joe and I agree on one thing.
Right. Yeah, what's the old saying about that?
The more you hire, the more problems you have.
What's the?
She just made that up.
I know, there's so many jokes to come to mind.
Is that true about kids too?
Oh,
Yeah.
we budgeted in-house. So it shows up in personnel. It shows up on a different, so it shows up in the top section, salaries and wages. So we did not budget contracted services for.
So it's not really a savings. It's just we're
the
picking it up
decrease.
someplace.
It's more of a decrease.
There's a
it's just
decrease
a-
here, but we're not saving that money altogether.
You're saving it on that line.
But we're not saving it all together. Okay, cool. That's because the corporate counsel has been a journey lately, and looks like we're going to end up.
Yeah, it's a decrease in contracted legal corporate counsel due to proposed internal position. is
So
what-
when we look at the corporate council in general under the expenses, we go from 569 to 731 for this past fiscal year. And then we're down to 484. Right?
I don't know. what-
Sorry, I'm gonna give you a page number. I didn't mean to. Page 8. Under corporate council. Sorry, fiscal 24 was the 500 number. The actuals for 25 were 700 something, and it looks like we're dropping now to 480. And that's
484,
right. So that's gonna be
92.
that's gonna be still be a contracted as opposed to an internal.
The fiscal year 26 recommended includes an internal candidate. I believe uh, y- yeah,
But then I still don't get how you're saving 330,000. I mean, you're still assigning that internal candidate to corporate council, right?
Well, you're,
not a savings, it's a decrease to contracted services. So when you're looking, I mean, that's an explanation of the contracted services line. So when you're explaining, sometimes you have to explain why an area went down.
it just got
And
moved.
it's just a move.
Okay,
Maybe we should have said move instead of a decrease on this line.
okay,
It's just a move.
okay.
It's just
It got
it-
moved to salaries.
it's a move. It's
Okay.
a move to salaries.
Okay, because the looks like there's only a $90,000 decrease in the actual corporate council.
Yes, it wasn't
That's-
intended to be a decrease in all of corporate council.
Okay, I think I got it.
And on page 8, where it's 484,000, that's for the entire department, correct? It's not just for one attorney.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the entire department.
Okay.
And if I could have just one more question on the contingency, same page 13. Funds set aside for implementation of the countywide wage study. When do we expect to see that in?
January,
All right, okay, cool.
we're anticipating January.
So the 627, is that some number that you're just estimating, or is that something that we've kind of told them, hey, if you could get this, like, you're shaking your head at me. and
It's
I'm-
a way.
That shaking,
So it's a guess.
it's a guess that, the guess is that the wage study will say, look, to implement this study, it's gonna cost you 600 some $1,000.
Nobody told me any number.
Wait, what?
Nobody
Sorry.
gave me a number. We didn't give anybody a target.
So, but the 627,
Is a it's a change in contingency.
okay,
So we generally adopt a higher contingency because I have no other information.
okay,
So that's where that number came from.
okay. So it's just a guess as to what the impact of the implementation of the wage study survey may be.
Maybe, yes.
Or it's just additional contingency because there's literally no information.
There's no information. And
Because
so,
there's none.
because there's no information. Yeah.
Let's
We don't know at this
wait and
time.
see.
I mean,
Could be a
yeah.
decrease,
it could be, yeah, it
could be
could
the same,
be another emergency. I mean,
could be anything at this point. We just don't know.
we don't know.
Okay,
And I know we said that up at the top in there and because that is why we increased the contingency, because at this point, the thing we're most aware of is that there's a wage study out there. In other years, they tend to cost money. But we don't know.
okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So I just have one question, I think, at this point now. Just, can you go back and clarify the deficit under the mayor's plan and what the plan is to kind of cover that over time? Can you address that again? You know, you did it at a meeting a couple months ago, but
We should probably do a work session at some point on the closed DB plan, just all by itself. It's, We haven't done one since 2019. So I guess after maybe my assignment is done, then there's probably a permanent administrator is hired. I would think that would be a great time to bring everybody up to the same point of our history, because there's a lot of history here. And I realized last year that I may be one of the only people left. Well, Phil.
And I don't remember everything.
Gonna make sure we film it. Make sure it's filmed then. Okay.
Yeah, right.
That sounds like a good idea. Okay. I don't have any other questions on it then. Allison?
I see Sheriff DeBoer is still here, and he was patiently waiting for this part. So I was wondering if he doesn't mind going through a little bit of the 3-district model for the sheriff's office.
What, Allison? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Going through a little bit of the plan for the 3-district model for the sheriff's office. This year will be year 1 of a 3-year phase-in, and I would love Sheriff DeBoer to be able to explain a little bit of what that potentially will look like.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So in the first couple months of our administration, I sat down with the undersheriff and the chief deputy, and we began having conversations on what we wanted our departmental priorities to be. And we engaged Department of Strategic Impact. And honestly, I can't say enough for Director Paul Sachs and his people, Joe Pierce and Stephanie, whose name I'm sorry, I've only read, I haven't said out loud. So, but they are amazing and help facilitate just some conversations and what is our action plan, which I will send out to you here shortly. But ultimately, it spurred some conversations with the undersheriff who didn't come up in this agency, trying to explain to him how we do things the way we do things. And the conversation kind of led us to show that we have some structural issues, some organizational issues that are leading to problems with chain of command and command and control. And so when we started really addressing it, we looked at it and we realized the weird thing was that on paper, we had the right amount of supervisors for deputies, but the way that they're deployed and the way that they're funded made it impossible for them to be utilized. For example, when I was on nights as a supervisor, there were times when my partner was gone that I was in charge of 21 deputies throughout the whole county. Then there are times where in a city contract, there is a sergeant and he's in charge of one person that's working. He might also have 3 other people under his control, 2 of which work nights and he works days. So there's some real issues we have with actual supervision. And if we're going to push cultural changes and implementation of getting back to our community policing roots, we took a look at what that actually looked like. Our biggest problem was that while we had the personnel, we couldn't deploy them correctly because some of the supervisors, the sergeant level, were being funded by townships, and therefore they couldn't be used outside of those townships. And so to deal with that, we used anybody that was funded by those townships to report to them. But again, that's part of the issue. So we sat down with the administrator's office and with Karen and kind of worked through what we could do. And unfortunately for our budget, it would include taking over funding from these townships for these supervisor positions and putting them under county control so that we can use them as we see fit. And now, again, reading through some historical documentation that had been left by Sheriff Kemker, who had been left to him by Sheriff Rosema, there was some longstanding historical conversations between counties and local township governments in which the overarching theory was that it's up to these individual cities, townships, villages, and schools to fund some of their police, but it's up to the county to provide supervision and administration. Therefore, there was at one point a formula that said for every so many contracted deputies, the county would then agree to put on a supervisor, a detective, or a records person. And so we looked at all of that. And so what it looks like is moving the current 7 sergeants that are funded by specific township cities or villages into county funding over the course of 3 years, allowing us to break our area into 3 districts, our county into 3 districts. So instead of all of the decisions coming from up here at Fillmore, where I'm engaged and I go to as many township meetings and I talk to as many township supervisors as I can. But let's be honest, We need to push some of that down at the lieutenant level to make those relationships work. Also, it allows me to start bringing up the next captains as they get the experience at the lieutenant level, and allows the sergeants to stop doing some of the administrative work and go out and mentor their men and women so that they can bring them up to be the best police officers, the best deputies that they can, and reach their career goals. So what that looks like is adding one lieutenant, which is what you see in the position request, so that we could have one lieutenant based at each divisional or district headquarters, and be that contact to the townships that are in that district, and the school systems that are in that district, and then have one sergeant on at all times in each district, barring vacation and sick time and all that. But that will put us on 3 sergeants on at all times, instead of right now during the day, there can be up to 10 to 14 sergeants on during the day. And if one of us is sick, one of them on at night. So ultimately, then sitting down, we worked through a 3-year plan that would kind of step increase that commitment from the county and move them over in the 3rd year. Like I said, I have a white paper explaining both the concept, the organizational change, and the justification. I was waiting for this meeting so that we can kind of introduce it to those of you that I haven't had a chance to speak with personally. And I'll send that white paper out as well as our strategic goals action plan here in the coming hours.
Eric, you said you would fund them instead of the townships, but it still sounds like the townships are going to fund something, correct?
So yeah, all the townships and the schools in the cities and the villages will still fund their police officers, their deputy level positions. And as each township grows, that they are responsible through advice from our command staff to say, hey, it's time. We've engaged in some preliminary talks with some of these townships, and some of them are even saying, well, they can use that cost savings to put on additional deputies. And so we're seeing that, and there are some very responsive townships out there that are coming to us saying, hey, we're planning this growth in this area. Should we talk about having more deputies? So that will continue. That's a model that's actually, when it was introduced at the sheriff's, new sheriff's school, for lack of a better term, by Sheriff Kempker, a number of sheriffs were looking at that as a possible way to go forward. I think that's one of the things that's allowed us, I think it was started under Sheriff Rosema, or possibly even before him with the units. It allowed us to grow in response to the growth in the communities where the growth was occurring, and has allowed us to field one of the most responsive agencies in the state. Any other
That's
questions?
why, in the part of the budget, you'll see that new lieutenant, but the other increase that you see to support this program is actually a transfer, because the sheriff's contracts are in a different fund. So we're transferring additional funding from the general fund to support those contracts. So the actual support actually comes in way of transfer from general fund to the contracts for the other support. So there's only really one new position, and then an increased transfer to support the contracts that will happen. The first is this year, and then it'll increase next year, and then the year after.
Yeah, without getting too deep in the weeds on how we plan to implement it, because it gets granular and you have to have a decent understanding of how we work already. But ultimately, we would pay for 1/3 of the sergeants the first year, 2/3 the second year, and full fund the 3rd year. Some of those aren't going to be filled right away. So there'll be an additional cost savings, and we work that with fiscal to try and help them understand exactly how much we'll need when. So.
Do any of the local municipalities have an objection to this plan?
So I have had very informal conversations, because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. If it were up to this body to say, no, we won't want to do that for you, then I would be kind of stuck out on a limb. But obviously, I'm having these conversations as they have their budget meetings to figure out if they're going to fund our deputies and at what cost. And as of this point, there's been a lot of acceptance to it. The couple that we think that maybe ones we have to have a little deeper conversations with were some of our contracts where we took over their police department specifically, because they saw that sergeant as their de facto chief, having them understand the whole process of saying, yeah, you're not going to have that sergeant there, but 3 miles down the road, there's a lieutenant who we meet with the sergeants every quarter because that's how often we can actually pull them all off the road and have one conversation. But I meet with my lieutenants every week. And so you're going to have a better access to me. You're going to have a better avenue by which for us to push our plan out there. Once that is explained, it's become pretty popular. So I was waiting for the word from fiscal that they could make it work because I knew what I was asking and I knew that Karen and her staff were doing all sorts of gymnastics to try and see if we can make that work. And then the administrator mugged me for $200,000 a couple times to try and make it work. But yeah, so once we kind of get the go ahead that that's something we think we're in support of, we'll start having some official meetings and some budget work groups from some of the contracts. So yeah.
So maybe this is too simple of a way to think of it, and maybe it's not possible, but going forward, so when you look at this, in year 3, then we might be looking at $1 million difference from where we are now. So would it be possible in your contracts at all to attach a portion of the cost? So say 7 officers require 1 supervisor. Can you attach a portion of the cost of that supervisor with the contracted officer to help offset the cost?
So, we looked at that because that was my first blush too, was can
Yeah.
we find a way in our contracts that we have 2 problems with it. First is the actual wording of the language says that there will be no cost. There's no administrative cost and there's no supervisory costs as that's taken on by the county. Now these certain townships have decided they wanted, and it was given to them through, the political process, and that's fine. The second part of it is that ongoing belief and that agreement from a meeting back in, I think, was it 82 or 87, sir? The first meeting that was in that long 400-page document that you handed me. That the overarching thought process was that they would pay for their deputies and the county would be responsible for their supervision. And so if I were going to try and do that, to try and make it, because we initially came to Karen with this is how much it costs. And I believe it was somewhere in the 1.5 million for personnel costs. The step in is allowing us to kind of slowly build that up so it's not quite a shock to the system. If we were going to do it another way, I would have to go and get new contracts with each of our contracting bodies and have them all pass through. And I'm not sure that everybody would be on board with that, given the prior arrangement and the historical context of that.
Just in the interest of time today, I'd be happy to add this as a discussion point for the next finance meeting. If there's additional conversation that needs to take place, give more commissioners time to.
And that'll give you time to read through the white paper as well.
Yeah.
You bet.
I have to be here for a couple other things anyway.
So it might be one more item we can consider for the agenda.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else for Karen on the budget? We move on.
I'd like to make a motion to set a public hearing for the 2026 Ottawa County budget for Tuesday, September 2.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, let's go. Next one, committee reports. Are there any committee reports? Justin, do you know? All right.
On the schedule.
This is the second public comment period. Anybody like to address the board?
Stolen your class.
Nobody here. Anybody online?
Public comment?
Yes, there is. Okay.
What?
Yes, Mr. Michael Kuras. Michael, if you could just state your name and jurisdiction, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, I'm Michael Kuras. I live in Spring Lake Township. I'd like to thank Karen and Myra for the tremendous job they did today in presenting both the budget and the capital improvement plan. She's been doing this for a while. This is the best presentation that I have heard in the many years that I've been listening to them. She did a really good job. And while I have the microphone, I'd like to remind Commissioner Berry and Commissioner Moss that I have an outstanding request to both of them for the last couple of months, and I still haven't heard anything back. I'm done.
Who's buying?
I am.
I just
Mike, I thought I paid for our breakfast though, didn't I?
go ahead, Michael. Sorry to interrupt.
You owe me another one, Michael.
Michael, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. Keep going, Michael.
Oh, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else online, Justin?
No, sir.
Okay, administrative update, Gary?
Just one quick thing, or I'll talk, at the next meeting. But, one of the things I appreciate about the sheriff's presentation and the focus about going to 3 versus 4 districts, it almost feels like it's come full circle. The whole idea of the county getting into funding and supervision, I think this county's of such a size that, it's just a logical thing to do. And I think the most logical people to do it are the staff at the sheriff's office creating that supervision level versus a supervisor that may supervise 1 or 2 people. Again, I think it's a much better use. Early on, we developed these contracts and the formula based around the county. If the local units bought so many deputies, then the county would fund a supervisor, detective, and somewhere along the line, a clerical support. And our partners out there have maintained that idea for years and years and years. And I think once the county administration sat back and realized that, we were selling a boatload of deputies back at the time, and all of a sudden it was going to cost them for supervision and stuff, and realized that maybe they better slow this process down. So I'm glad that now it's come back and we're starting on that right track. The other thing is because the sheriff indicated that he went back to some historical resources. One of the things I'd like to see us do at the administration office is with taking this communications person on, that we're going to shift into some responsibilities of maybe staff that's there to put together a historical collection of products that the new county administrator can use, because there's a lot of things that Ron and I have seen since we've been back that there's no basic understanding of what some of the past ideas were to move forward, whether it be judge space or whether it be, some levels of service in various departments. And I think it would be beneficial to all department heads to do a little bit of research into some of the historical ideas. I mean, just like, when we came out to this campus here, we just didn't want to throw up buildings anywhere and everywhere. We wanted to have a strategic plan where to do that. I think what Karen's presented today will give a logical strategic plan to our facilities. And without looking back at some of the historical things, I think we'll lose kind of a focus on some of the things that should be done, whether it's a training center out here for the sheriff or what it is. We're going to, look at doing that for the county as well. So again, we'll utilize, any resources we can to get that done.
Thank you. So let's move on to commissioner comments. Joel, anything?
Nothing.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I'll make a quick comment. I thought the presentation was great. One thing that came clear to me is that, I have a lot to learn, number one. But what was more important to me was the camaraderie that it seems to exist within the staff in all your departments. It showed. I mean, Eric DeBoer couldn't have said more nice things about how you guys handle this process. And I think he was an example of that. So I want to just commend you for that. That's kind of where I'm at on this. Phil or Doug? Any comment you want to make? This comment time? Anything want to say?
I'm good. Thank you.
I'm good.
You
Yeah.
didn't want to say?
But I was gonna kudos to Karen and Chris. So
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you said it perfect. Thank you.
Doug?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Jim?
Just make mention, a week ago Monday, I stopped by for the veterans job fair that was here. And they had a real nice turnout, I think, of employers that were here, range of different industries and services, and Veterans Affairs guys were all there, and they had their swag and everything. And when I was there, I wouldn't say it was a huge crowd, but it appeared to be pretty well attended. And just congratulations on a good event.
Good. Kendra? Sylvia?
Just thank you, Gary and Karen, for all your work on this.
Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you much.